Welcome to another exciting episode of Submission Radio. It's August 24th, and this UFC weekend would not be complete without some analysis by the sexiest men in MMA radio today. Dennis Skradov and Kasper Roslowski here.
What a beautiful introduction, and factual as always. Indeed, we will be breaking down both cards, both Lee and Bisping UFC Fight Night, and of course Benson Henderson versus Rafael dos Anjos. We will be giving our expert laid-back advice on all the fights on there, or at least the main cards, and we've got some big sexy guests coming on the show. Starting the show will be none other than Chris the Crippler Lieben. He's decided to give up some of his sweet time and chat to us and chat to all the Aussie fans about his career, retirement, and a whole bunch of other things. Then we will be chatting to Anderson Silva's manager, Ed Suarez. We want to get an update on Anderson. We're going to talk Lyoto Machida, Glover Teixeira, and then we will be chatting to none other than King Mo. He's got a big fight coming up September 5th, Bellator 123. A sneaky opponent change was in the works for King Mo. We want to get the latest, find out his thoughts on that.
That's right, Cass. And, you know, Chris Lieben going home right now with the sneaky 3 wins for Victory MMA with 2 rear naked chokes and a TKO. It looks like everything's going well in the coaches department for the Crippler.
He's been doing a lot of coaching. That's basically his life after retirement. But let's not forget, Chris Lieben, I mean, he's got some crazy stories. He had a very storied career. We're going to obviously chat to him about what he's been doing post-fight, but also we want to reflect on his awesome career, what's been happening, some of those crazy stories. They're going to be all told on Submission Radio. Just quickly before we get Chris on the line, you can follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS, that's Submission Oz. Check out our Facebook page. Just go to submissionradio.com. You can pretty much see everything that you need. Brand new articles coming, and of course the transcripts for all these interviews. Until then, guys, I think it's about time to get Chris on the line. What do you think, Dennis?
Our next guest is a UFC veteran. He has captured the hearts of MMA fans all over the world and is a cast member from the original Ultimate Fighter. He has won the UFC Knockout of the Night bonus 4 times, Fight of the Night 2 times, and is the all-time leader in UFC middleweight fights. The record right now is at 22. On the show, we have Chris the Crippler Lieben. Chris, welcome to Submission Radio.
What's up, man? Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. Obviously, the accolades are just amazing. Now, Chris, it was a bittersweet moment when you decided to retire from the sport from a fan's perspective. But tell us, how's retirement treating you, and what have you been up to?
Oh, man, retirement's actually, it's great, believe it or not. I mean, I may have retired from fighting, but I'm anything but retired. You know, I'm actually working harder than I ever have in my entire life. But, you know, as far as how I feel about the whole retirement, yeah, man, I mean, I couldn't have been more, you know, certain about a decision. You know, everything in life is finite, you know, and for me, it was my time. So, you know, now I've made the switch from being in the cage to being on the outside of the cage. So I've got a job at Victory MMA right down here in San Diego, California, and I'm the head MMA instructor. I think my official title is MMA director. So not bad. You know, I teach a few classes. I teach some beginner classes, some intermediate classes, and then I also manage the Victory Fight team. So I've got kids fighting amateur and pro every weekend. You know, it's what I love. The sport is what I love. You know, it's you know, it's the only thing I know, and it's about all I'm good at as well. So, you know, really lucky for me to be able to find a job where I can continue, you know, just kind of continue progressing and growing as a martial artist.
That sounds awesome, and we're definitely really happy for you, Chris. And in terms of, you know, you've always seemed like a real people person, very sort of personable. You know, what is it like teaching these kids, you know, really young kids, and seeing them, you know, grow up and learning the knowledge and passing down your MMA knowledge to them? How does that make you feel?
You know, it's great. I mean, it's 1 second, there's an airplane, airplane flying over. You know, I love it. You know, coaching it's so rewarding. You know, whether it's it's a younger kid that comes in and he's getting in all kinds of trouble at school and he's not doing well in school, and then all of a sudden he starts training, he loses weight. You know, he gets self-confidence, and once a kid knows he's tough, he doesn't have to prove it anymore. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that happen. You know, all the way up to my 21-year-old kid that's stepping into the cage for his first fight, you know, and being in their corner when they get their hand raised for the first time, and just being able to kind of relive that feeling and how alive they feel, you know, and know that, you know, I was part of what got them to that point. And then also, you know, there's some downsides. You know, I get these young kids on my team, and I see them making some of the mistakes that I was making, you know, when I was that age, you know, and I'm going, what are you doing out all night, man? You got a fight in 2 weeks. Come on, you know, snap out of it, you know. So, you know, it's definitely a big ball of emotion. I mean, coaching it's a passion for me. You know, I love it. I love the highs. I love the lows. And I love all the drama and the inner workings of you know, being in a gym all day, every day. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and you know what? Something that you mentioned there, just about like people having trouble pass and things like that, and just, you know, when you teach a kid, generally he'll be a lot more confident. Now, there's always bad things happening in the world. Unfortunately, sometimes in MMA with the whole War Machine incident and Josh Grisby and things like that. And I think a lot of the media that don't really follow MMA want to cast a negative light on MMA, like it's you know, the root of all evil, things like that.
Right.
But in your opinion, would you find that generally you take a kid who's, you know, not so confident, you teach MMA, they find confidence, and they generally don't want to fight. They generally don't want to fight in the street because they don't find that, they don't feel that need.
99.99% of the time. The fact of the matter is, too, the tough guys that are out starting fights, you know, whether it's in school or they grow up and then they're out starting fights, and those tough guys, they don't ever train. They don't want to train because they can't lose. They can't stand to lose even in the gym, you know. And these kids that are getting in trouble in school, yeah, absolutely, man. I was one of them. You know, they're trying to prove themselves. And let me tell you who they're trying to prove themselves to. It's not their friends. It's not their parents. It's themselves. They're trying to prove they're up to themselves. And once they get in and they start training and they get that humility of tapping out 10,000 times, and then next thing you know, they're tapping some other people out. You know, they're the hammer sometimes, not the nail all the time, you know. You know, you just see their whole world transforms, and they get this self-confidence about them. And it's kind of like when you know. So that's kind of what I've noticed with pretty much every kid I've worked with, you know. You know, they may join the gym, they may get in one or two fights, you know, in the first 6 months of their training there. But after that, you know, I haven't had a kid ever that's continued to get in fights and get in trouble at school. Every single one of them, bar none, has turned that around, and I've worked with a ton of them over the years.
Absolutely, Chris. You know, and you bring up an interesting perspective. A lot of young people are joining MMA these days. The UFC, you know, sometimes gets kids straight out of, you know, high school, college, going right in there. Do you think that there should be a program with someone like yourself, working with some of these kids, working from more of a psychological perspective and dealing with a lot of these things that they may deal with coming from different backgrounds?
You know, I mean, I think there is a program, and I think that's, you know, that's kind of what I'm running at my gym right now, you know. You know, and I really do. As a coach, definitely 100%. I think one of the reasons I like it so much is, you know, you're part coach. You know, part of my job is teaching them technique and everything else. But then I'm basically a registered counselor. I might as well be, because, you know, you help people with one thing, and ultimately they start looking to you to help them with everything else in their life, you know. And, you know, I think that's great. And you going in and training, being part of and having that part of your routine is absolutely kid, you know. So it's nice to see actually now that, you know, there's places for kids to go where they can practice and do this MMA, you know, in an actual real gym, safe and secure. I mean, when I was in high school, that wasn't really an option. You know, we were in the backyard. So, you know, it is great that more and more gyms are popping up, and kids are able to get into the sport the right way, you know, and safely, and you know, gain from all the benefits that the sport has to offer.
Now, coaching at Victory MMA, you seem pretty certain and pretty happy with your retirement. But do you ever have moments in the ring when, when teaching or sparring with students where you get that itch to go back and, think about possibly fighting for one last time?
I do. I mean, anybody would, if they told you they didn't, they'd be a liar. I mean, to some extent I do, and I know, if I knew that I can fight and that I would win 100% of the fights that I was in, I might actually do it. But then I also remember, how hard a training camp really is. Every training camp takes a little bit out of you, all the work that I have to go through, what my relationship has to go through with all the sacrifice, putting all the time in the gym, being tired all the time, I mean, the fact of the matter is, yes, this sport's awesome. It's, there's nothing like your hand raised in the octagon. But what people don't realize is that's your 15 minutes of glory maximum. The rest is blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice. I mean, so usually when I have that thought, man, I want to get back in there, I start reminding myself, now think about it, Chris. Remember all the blood, the sweat, the tears, the sacrifice. Look right now where you're at. You're happy, and that's what I do.
Now, Chris, we don't have that much time with you, so we'll jump to some of the questions to do with your MMA career. One of the things we usually get people coming up to us and always talking about in terms of Chris Leben is you and Josh Koscheck. You guys have had such a huge rivalry. Obviously, the first Ultimate Fighter really made a big impression all over the world. And everybody always wanted to see that rematch. It seemed like a no-brainer for the UFC to put together the rematch. I was just wondering, how come it never happened? Did it ever come close to coming together? And how badly did you want that rematch?
I mean, the obvious thing is, Josh dropped down to 70. That was the obvious thing. But even past that, I would have loved to have had him do it as, just kind of a super fight. Like, hey, man, let's throw a catch weight at 180 pounds. You know what I'm saying? Something like that, Ultimately, I would have been great for it. Not because I hate Josh and I want to beat him up, because it's a fight and fights for money. Truthfully, there's no ill will between me and him, and here's why. It's not like we hugged and made up. It's more like, I only have so much time in my life, so I don't have time to hold a resentment against the guy for being an idiot for the rest of my life. You know what I'm saying? Then I'm going to be one of those just old, angry people that's just mad at the world and just wants to sit in their chair and slowly die, That's kind of, so I kind of, inside, I've let it go. I've let that rivalry, a long time ago, I let that rivalry go. Now, would I still fight him? Absolutely. I'd fight him right now if they'd set it up, I think it'd be a good fight, honestly. Obviously I'm a little bigger than him, but Josh is an amazing athlete, I always, when I was fighting, and even now, I always love a challenge, I'm never the kind of guy that goes, I want to take something easy. Wouldn't be, but I play Josh, I definitely would do it. So that's where I'm at. No ill will. Kind of wish the UFC would have put the together, but for one reason or another, it never did happen.
Now, it's interesting, while we're on the subject of Josh Koscheck, you guys are sort of kind of like the last of the Mohicans. Funnily enough, we did an interview with Diego Sanchez just the other day. You guys are all from that group of the first Ultimate Fighter. Now, Josh, he's had some, one by one, a lot of you guys are sort of retiring, moving on. He's had some tough fights as of late. There's a lot of fighters sticking around, possibly a little bit too long. What do you think in terms of Josh Koscheck and, his career? Do you think that, maybe he's starting to wind down and possibly thinking about starting to move on from MMA?
It's tough because you really can't say exactly when it's somebody else's time. I definitely say it's getting close, and I definitely say, he's made his mark, and if I was talking to Josh, I'd say, look at what you've done. Look at how long you've been here. Look at the time. You know where you're at as far as all the people in the UFC. You beat 8 out of 10 guys in the UFC right now in your weight division, for sure. But you've been here so long, and you got to look. There's that 20% that you're just not going to beat. So you've already figured that out. Why keep hanging around? You've done everything you need to do. Hang it up and move on.
Now,
That would be my advice to him. But if he wants to keep going, every time I see him sit up there and fight, he's in great shape. He's healthy, everything else.
Now, Chris, when we found out you were coming on the show, we were pretty excited because people don't really know this about us, but we're actually really big Chris Lieben fans. We always made a point of watching your fights, together, and, really enjoyed everything that came with a Chris Lieben fight. And one of the most unbelievable moments in your career for us was when you took Akiyama on 2 weeks notice after you defeated Aaron Simpson with a very impressive win. You beat Akiyama with a triangle choke. At the very end, me and Casper, it was something we spoke about for a while with all of our buddies here in Australia, which really makes a statement. What was that period like for you, Chris? And would you say that was one of your highlights, one of your career highlights there?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a wild ride. I had asked for Aaron Simpson specifically because, he had ended up, my friend Ed Herman, who's one of my best friends in the whole world, had fought him previously, and he beat Ed Herman, but I feel he only really beat Ed Herman because Ed Herman tore his ACL out during the fight. And Aaron was undefeated at the time, so I knew he was going to be tough. So, it's funny because everyone talks about my Akiyama fight. It was a great fight. I loved it, but it's kind of funny because it was a great fight because I didn't the best I ever had. Like, for Aaron Simpson, that's probably my favorite in a way that I just kind of out-techniqued him and had a pretty clean, decisive victory over Aaron Simpson. And then it was just so hard because I came home, I ordered a large pizza. I remember sitting down with my wife, eating a large pizza, like, oh, got my victory, yeah. And then the phone rings, and it's Joe Silva, and he's telling me he wants me to fight. And I'm like, what? I just fought, And so, I had the next day, so I fought on Saturday, and Monday I was back in the gym training, And, the thing is, your body, you really can't peak twice, if that makes sense, So it was a little bit of hell on my body, but it was also great, too, because, one, I made a ton of money with the back-to-back wins. It was probably one of the highest moment in my career. I think to this day, still nobody's fought with just a weekend apart like that. It was a little bit strange, but I guess probably the best thing about the way that fight worked out was that I didn't have time to worry. I didn't have 8 to 12 weeks to train for Akiyama and think about what he's going to do. It was just like, okay, boom, and we're fighting next week. So next thing I know, I was back in my hotel room at Vegas. It was crazy. It's like Groundhog's Day. But the fight itself, it was awesome because neither one of us dodged or moved. We just stood in front of each other like rock'em sock'em robots, for half the fight and traded blows. Still pretty lucky and definitely very, very glad I managed to come out with the W on that one because he definitely landed some pretty solid shots in that fight. It's funny, actually. I remember after the fight walking back to backstage, and I asked my coach, I said, what was that, about halfway through the second round? So what? And when I look back and I think, I can remember the first round, and I can remember about halfway through the second round. Something happened to me about halfway through the second round where I don't remember the third round. I don't remember talking to Joe. So he definitely landed a few good ones.
That fight, honestly, it was one of those ones where, after when you hit that triangle, me and Dennis, I think we jumped up and we were like, yeah, it was one of those like, oh my God, you're watching the fights with your mates, everyone jumps up and cheers. It was crazy. You guys basically stood in front of each other for 3 rounds, and then it looked like you were down on the scorecards, and you locked up that triangle like with seconds to go. It was insane.
Yep. So,
Now, Chris,
yeah.
you mentioned obviously in terms of you made a ton of money then, but you have made some other comments previously about UFC fighters not having a retirement fund and making it for difficult fighters to continue on after retirement. Do you think that's any kind of issue in MMA? Do you think something needs to be put in place like that?
Yeah, I do. You know, I mean, I'm gonna watch my mouth with what I say here, but you know, absolutely, I feel like, you know, I know Dana's got online and said that, you know, hey, the UFC it's an opportunity and da da da. Well, you know, I don't know. I feel like it's more than that. You know, when people dedicate their entire lives and their entire existence to performing, putting on a show for, you know, ultimately for a certain organization, because they're the big ones, you know. And if you make it, that's where you go, you know. And right now, the way it's structured, you know, I don't know about that are set for life from their fighting. You know what I mean? I know a lot of football players and basketball players, and baseball players, you know, you know, and boxers, you know. But I feel like that's the direction that the UFC is going. It's becoming a mainstream sport. You know, it's becoming a sport. You know, and if you want to be like the NBA or the NFL or whatever, you know, you probably should treat your athletes like that as well. You know, you should have, you know, financial advisors for them, help them out, you know, give them different options, 401k. Hey, look, we're going to pay you this much money, but look, you don't have to take it all. You can put half of it into a retirement fund. You know, I'm not such as they need to be paying, but, you know, even some simple options, especially for a dumb 20-year-old kid, you know, that was raised without a penny to his name his entire life, you know, to just hand him a check and say, here you go, buddy. Now make sure to pay your taxes, you know. I feel like it's a little irresponsible.
Some great points there, Chris. And we know that we have a limited amount of time with you, so we've got some fan questions here. We'll shoot a couple at you. The first fan question comes from a man called Scientist. Scientist. Well, there you go. The question is, what is the greatest Chris Lieben story that you can tell us?
Oh man, well actually I'm working on the book right now, so I've been coming up with a lot of them. Probably one, and I'll just tell the short version that I was actually going to be in the book, was about right before I fought Brian Stann. I actually went out. My brother worked in Las Vegas at a place that sold those frozen drinks, you know. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I got blackout drunk the day before weigh-ins. I went back into the Hard Rock, and for some reason something upset me, so I was in the bathroom stall, the back bathroom stall, and I kicked my way all the way to the exit by kicking the stall walls down. They were like marble stall walls. And so I just decided to kick all the stall walls down to the exit, and big surprise, I got arrested. So the security guard for Hard Rock's handcuffing me and everything else. And the guys I was with were like from Ireland, and apparently they thought I was Irish too, because I was just mocking their accent, fucking with them. But I think they literally thought I was Irish. So I ended up driving my way out. So before his reinforcements came, I gave him $500. He let me run up to my room. Ended up waking up, you know, my phone's ringing off like crazy, and wake up in a pile of puke. I'm late for my photo shoot for the UFC. It was a nightmare, because I thought it was only 8 in the morning, but somehow I had set the alarm wrong on the wall, and that's the time I wanted to wake up. I thought it was 8 in the morning, but it was actually noon. So, and that was like 2, maybe 3 days before I had to step in and have a war with Brian Stann. So, yeah, the book is definitely coming along. You know, hopefully we get a great publisher to publish it, but I'm definitely getting it all down on paper. When it comes out, it's going to be an exactly what not to do if you're going to have an MMA career.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, next fan question. Popmaster501 wants to know, out of all your wins, which one was the toughest?
Out of all my wins, which one was the toughest? You know, my favorite fight, and guys can look it up online, It actually wasn't even in the UFC. It was against a guy named Otto Olsen. He was the hometown hero. He actually took second in Abu Dhabi. And in wrestling, the only person he lost to his senior year was Josh Check. Believe it or not, he wrestled for Michigan State. But great fighter. Also school teacher up in Washington too. But that fight, if you can watch it on YouTube, man, that guy kicks the fucking shit out of me for the first 3 minutes of the round, and then he puts me in this super crazy guillotine that he gets everybody and he finishes them with. Falls back to it. Meanwhile, the crowd is going crazy. They've been like pumping drinks in the crowd. It's like now it's well after midnight. Crowd's blackout drunk, hometown hero. So anyways, he gets me in the guillotine, and you see me raise my hand to tap. The referee's on the other side of the hand I raise. And then I end up going unconscious. So you see my hand just falls limp, right? And I'm completely passed out. Well, look, he like tries to readjust to just for some reason I'm not tapping. I guess he doesn't know I'm fucking sleeping. I actually had a little dream during the fight. It's really trippy. So next thing I know, I pop my head out and I'm just doing the drunken stumble backwards. And he pops up and he comes after me like he's ready to finish me. I'm done. And as I'm walking backwards, he goes to shoot in and I just take like a drunken swing. And boom, out fucking cold, man. Actually, no, he tried to get up, and then he fell into the corner, and then he stood up, and then he fell. He ran all the way and fell into the other corner. So, Chris Lieben, Otto Olsen on YouTube. It's a good one. It's funny.
Wow.
We actually had to sneak out of the back door on that one, and then after I win, you just see beer cans and shit flying at me, man. They were pissed.
Wow, what a story. Now, Chris, we know you're very limited of time, so we're going to quickly do a tap-out round. It goes for a couple of minutes tops. We basically throw a whole bunch of words at you, and you give us a whole bunch of questions at you, and you give us the first thing that comes to your mind. So when you're ready, I'll throw the first question at you.
Little warning about that, you know.
Here we go.
Most fights in the middleweight division, man, my brain doesn't work quite as fast as other people's, so
don't worry.
I don't like to do this.
These are some rib ticklers right here. Now, does Chris Lieben still have red hair in retirement?
No.
Okay, what's a dream job that you'd like to have if you weren't an MMA coach or fighter?
An MMA judge or referee, man. Something in the sport.
Yes.
Man, that's needed badly. Now, who's an MMA fighter that you look up to that has inspired you throughout your career?
I would say Vanderlei Silva and Fedor.
For sure. When was the last time you watched an episode of the original Ultimate Fighter?
Years and years and years.
Now that you've retired from MMA, can you tell us who was the secret person who allegedly hopped over the wall and called from the second episode of The Ultimate Fighter?
Stephan Bonner.
Finish this sentence. People don't know that I...
People don't know that I read a lot.
What went through your head in 2008 when you were displaying how to do chokeholds in prison and that guy wouldn't wake up for like 30 seconds?
Oh, yeah, that's fuck, I went in for 30 days and I'm not leaving for another 10 years.
If you could rematch anyone in your story career, who would it be and why?
I really think I'd like to rematch Brian Stan. That fight just didn't work out the way, and I don't know. I was super sick going into the fight, and I just really feel like I could have performed better. But you know, water. Obviously, with that, I'll say water in the bridge, and there's no such thing as making up for a loss. So,
what's a song that you've never come out to for a fight that you wish you could have?
Well, I always tried to go out to Slayer, Raining Blood. But apparently it's too hardcore for the UFC.
Oh man, here's we'll try and get the short version now. What's Chris Lieben's secret to a successful marriage?
Keep her happy, and she's always right, bro.
Yeah.
Happy wife, happy life. What's the What's the strangest experience you've ever seen or had at an MMA event?
Oof, I've had a lot of them. Last time at a show, I had a guy who was pissing next to me. Look, oh my God, Chris Weidman. They started slapping me on the back and shaking me and trying to shake my hand as I was holding my wiener. So that was a little weird. I was like, dude, I'm pissing, man. I'm peeing. What are you doing? Dude, it's not okay.
Oh, man. Now, Chris, you've accomplished so much in mixed martial arts. What can we expect next from the Crippler?
And hopefully Coach of the Year. You know, I'm pouring my heart and soul into coaching. You know, in just the last month alone, I've had 5 amateur wins, 2 amateur titles, and 3 pro wins with 0 losses for my team. Nice. So definitely doing some stuff right, you know. So I've got 3 guys fighting pro in the next Gladiator Challenge coming up down in San Diego next weekend, you know. So 3 more wins from them, you know, and that's it, man. I was, you know, my pad holding skills, you know, working on training guys. Obviously, you know, I don't train guys the way that I fight. Obviously, you know, I really feel like I was a good fighter, but I'm a great coach. I think I have a good eye for the sport. I've been around long enough and I've seen it, you know, enough to really look at somebody, know what their attributes are, and help them out, you know. And that's my mission in life now, is to take other people and see how far I can help them go, you know, benefit them in any way, you know. It's kind of mutual. It's mutual. It's symbiotic, you know, being a coach, because, you know, I get to help them, I get to watch them grow, and then obviously that, you know, the better they do and the more success they have, the better I do and the more success I have.
And finally, Chris, when is Chris Lieben coming down to Australia, teach some Aussies how to kick some ass, do some surfing down here, and share some of that amazing MMA knowledge?
I want to go to Australia so bad. Yes, I want to go surfing. I want to go down there and hang out. But here's the problem. Something about Australia and Canada, I got a couple rules about legal things, you know, I just don't understand it. Apparently, nobody in Australia drinks and drives. Because if you're in America and you drink and drive, they won't let you go to Australia. Bunch of bullshit, right?
Yeah. I think Aussies are famous for driving.
Yeah, exactly. That, from what I know, that's more or less what all you guys do down there is drink, then maybe drive somewhere and drink some more.
That's pretty much the
you know. But I mean, so I've had some issues trying to get into the country, I guess.
Well, look, that's.
But I'd like to get that figured out, because it's on my list, man. That's one of the places I want to go more than anywhere else in the world.
Well, look, Chris, we would always be happy to have you here. We'll try and make some calls to the people in the Cayman Islands, get this sorted, and hopefully have you down here one day to surf and teach us how to fight. Guys, check him out on Twitter, Chris Lieben, at Crippler UFC, or go to his website, christhecripplerlieben.com, and stay tuned. Check out that book. We want to read all about it, and hopefully have you on again in the future to chat about that book. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure and honor having a chat to you.
Right on, man. Thanks, guys. It's great being on.
Hey, everybody. This is Tyron, the Chosen One Woodley. You are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a manager of some fighters, such as Lyoto Machida, Glover Teixeira, Antonio Nogueira, and, of course, Anderson Silva, to say the least. He is none other than Ed Soares. Ed, welcome to Submission Radio. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Oh, absolutely fantastic to have you on, and great. Now, let's talk about the big fight. Everybody's excited about Nick Diaz, Anderson Silva. Tell us about how long it's been in the making and how it all came together.
Well, I mean, it's you know, it's been talked about for quite a while. But I think the way it all came together was, I mean, it was just a fight that made sense, and Dana and Lorenzo, you know, thought it was a great fight, and they made it happen.
Now, Ed, what is it about Nick Diaz specifically that really attracted Anderson to this fight? Obviously, it's gauged his interest. It's a bit of a challenge, but what is it specifically about Nick Diaz that Anderson enjoys in this matchup?
Well, I just think it's just a fight that makes sense. I mean, arguably, these guys are two of the best boxers in mixed martial arts. They both wanted to fight Roy Jones Jr. You know, they both are coming off of 2 losses. They both have been out of the ring for over a year. So it's just a fight that, you know, it makes sense.
Now, Ed, both men are very accomplished in their respective divisions and MMA in general, and it's one of the biggest matchups in a long time. There is a lot of debate, though, whether it is a super fight or not, just due to technically there being no titles involved. What are your thoughts, and do you believe that this fight is a super fight?
I think it is a super fight. That's exactly what it is. I mean, there's no titles involved, but it's going to be bigger than 99% of all the title fights.
Absolutely, Ed. Now, Randy Couture was on the show last week, and he was talking about the matchup a little bit, and he was talking about how he was a little bit worried about Anderson coming back to the Diaz fight after the horrific injury that he suffered in the octagon. At any point, was there a warm-up fight discussed with Anderson Silva before returning to the octagon against someone like Nick Diaz?
No, there's no talk about a warm-up fight. I mean, no, not at all. I mean, Nick hasn't had a warm-up fight either. Nick hasn't been in the ring for just under 2 years. You know what I'm saying? Like 18 or 19 months. So they've both taken the time off. So neither one is going to have an advantage of, fighting on a regular basis. No, neither one has an advantage on that.
Yeah, and obviously when a fighter like Anderson suffers a horrific injury like the one he did, people get scared when he decides to come back. I wonder if he'll ever be the same again. What's the vibe that you get at the moment from Anderson?
I think he believes. I think he'll be back, and he'll go as far as he wants to apply himself to. I think if anybody can come back from an injury like this and come back and put that title around his waist again, if anybody in the world can do it, it's Anderson Silva.
Absolutely right, Ed. Anderson is such a legend, especially down here in Australia and New Zealand, this part of the world. Now, Anderson mentioned that he hopes that Nick stays respectful in the build-up to this fight. However, we all know when it comes to fight time, trash talk is one of Nick's strategies. Is that something that Anderson is prepared to deal with in the octagon come fight night?
Yeah, I think he's prepared to deal with that, but I honestly believe that Nick Diaz is going to take a different approach. I don't think Nick Diaz has anything personal against Anderson Silva. I think Nick Diaz looks at Anderson Silva as a true, real martial art challenge, and he believes he's got what it takes to be able to fight him. So I don't think it has anything to do with disrespect, and with all due respect, Nick Diaz, most of the time, Nick Diaz doesn't start off with the trash talking. It's normally somebody else that starts off with the trash talking, and he kind of finishes it up. You know what I'm saying? But Nick Diaz, overall, I don't see him much as a guy that just starts off talking trash.
It's an interesting point. In the last few fights that Anderson had, he seemed, very content and almost bored, like somebody who's played the same video game 1,000 times and beaten it. Now for the first time in a while, he's looking up the hill. There's a lot of challenges he has to overcome, like the return from injury and possible cage rust. Just being a challenge.
And I think that's going to be the biggest motivation to seeing Anderson back to what he once was. I believe that there got a point in Anderson's career where maybe subconsciously he forgot what it was like not to be the champ, and I think now he's kind of looking up that hill, realizing that he's got some more challenges to conquer.
And now, Ed, speaking of challenges, Anderson said clearly in a few interviews that, Chris Weidman in the middleweight championship is not really his goal at the moment. Do you see him pursuing the championship in the future, or do you foresee Anderson, fighting out his contract, with super fights like Nick Diaz and other dream matches the fans would like to see?
Well, I think right now it's one fight at a time. I don't think we can make any real calculated. I don't think we can make any decisions until we see how this first fight plays out. But I think, right now what's on his mind is this fight on January 31st against Nick Diaz, and only time will tell what's in the future.
Now, Ed, we haven't heard many reports about Anderson throwing kicks. Just as an update, how is the leg, and has Anderson been throwing any kicks yet?
He's doing great, man. He's throwing kicks. He's doing everything.
Ed, last weekend we saw you and Anderson with Metamoris. The event was great, and it almost seemed like Chael Sonnen was going to call out Anderson on the mic after his grappling match. Obviously Anderson has contemplated going into boxing, but would he ever consider competing at an event like Metamoris? Obviously, he's a great grappler.
Maybe he would. He's interested in that.
And speaking of sort of venturing, outside of your typical, UFC fight, what about the Roy Jones Jr. fight? Obviously, he's got Nick Diaz on January 31st, but is Roy Jones Jr. someone that's sort of still, a possibility in Anderson's future?
You know what? Right now, man, what he's got on his mind is that there's always a possibility, and there's always maybe something in the future. But the truth of the matter is right now what's on his mind is Nick Diaz, January 31st in Las Vegas. That's what's on his mind.
All right, Ed, well, let's move on to your other client, Lyoto Machida. Obviously, he has respectfully suggested that Luke Rockhold could be a possible opponent for him next. Do you think Luke is the right fight for Lyoto? And would you like to see Lyoto back in the octagon with Chris Weidman eventually to have a rematch after that epic fight they had recently?
At the end of the day, I think Lyoto is basically, I think he needs to fight top contenders, and whoever the UFC puts in front of him that's in the top 10, he'll gladly take.
And in terms of Glover Teixeira, I mean, he's obviously got a big fight coming up against Phil Davis at UFC 179. How's preparation going so far for Glover?
Oh, he's doing good. He's training hard, and, he'll be ready for that fight.
And Ed, Little Nog, another one of your clients, perhaps one of the most respected athletes in the UFC, had a difficult performance against Anthony Johnson recently. Just wondering how his spirit's going, if it was a difficult bout, and are we going to see the decorated MMA fighter in the octagon again?
Oh, of course we are. I believe that I believe we'll see him again, without a doubt. I think he was out of the octagon for a while, and he had a little bit of ring rust, and he's just gonna have to get back on that horse sooner and get back in there and fight. I think Little Nog is still one of the top 10 fighters in the light heavyweight division, without a doubt. He got caught. Someone gets caught like that, the fight didn't even really start. It was 40 seconds, a lot. It doesn't seem like a lot, but a lot can happen in 40 seconds. And, Nogueira sometimes has a tendency to start a little bit slow. And this time, he got hit, he got rocked, and Anthony Johnson capitalized on it and finished him.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed, we basically told the fans that you were coming on the show, and they had a whole bunch of questions. So we got a couple of fan questions for you, if that's okay. Tadia wants to know, what did you feel when Silva slipped on that triangle in the last round of the first Chael fight? What was your reaction?
Man, you know what, man? That was pure ecstasy, man. That was awesome, dude. I mean, I got to tell you, that was definitely as a manager and in the fight business, that was definitely one of the great moments in my career, without a doubt.
Brod Blade would like to know, is Anderson considering a move to the welterweight division in the near future, and do you think he could do it and still compete at the highest level?
I do think he could make it, but it would take a long process because he'd have to definitely cut out some muscle in comparison to what his body's at now. But I don't think that's too much in the future. I think him competing at middleweight is where he's at.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people would rather. Here's a fun one. Itsy Bitsy Silva wants to know, have you ever eaten Burger King together with Anderson Silva?
I can hear you. What did you say? I lost that one. I heard something about Burger King.
Yeah, Itsy Bitsy Silva wanted to know, have you and Anderson ever sat down and eaten at a Burger King together?
Of course we have, all the time.
And finally, Mega Tree.
We eat at Burger King, we eat at McDonald's. I'll tell you, man, unfortunately, we like to eat junk food.
You and us both, don't worry about that.
Keeps the bond strong. Now, Megatron Lee would like to know, how often do you and Anderson hang out and do non-fighter stuff? And what do you guys do apart from eating junk food?
Man, we do stuff all the time. As a matter of fact, he just got certified in scuba, and I'm certified in scuba, and we just bought brand new equipment. And just last Friday, we dove in one of the pools just to test out all our equipment.
Very nice.
So we just kind of went scuba diving on Friday together.
Living the good life. Now, Ed, we're going to do what we call the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. It's basically a fun sort of getting to know you round. We fire off a bunch of questions, and you tell us the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yep. All
right. Now, we know Ed Soares obviously is a great manager, but how good are you at grappling?
I'm all right. I can hold my own.
Ed, will Steven Seagal be working with Anderson Silva ahead of his fight with Nick Diaz?
I don't think so, not at the moment.
PEDs in MMA, are they an issue in your opinion?
I mean, they're an issue, yeah. I mean, they're a banned substance, and people do them. So yeah, I definitely would say that would be an issue.
Who's an athlete in the RFA that we need to keep our eyes on?
Athlete in the RFA that you need to keep your eye on. God, there's quite a few of them. Trying to think. Maybe an unknown guy that people need to keep their eye on is possibly a guy named Gabriel Checo. He's going to be fighting for our middleweight title in October.
Okay, awesome. What does Ed Soares do as a hobby?
Man, I'm totally into stand-up surfing. I love to snow ski in the winter. I scuba dive. I like to surf, and I like to stay active. I do things like that. In the winter, it's snow skiing, man. That's my first love.
Who's the biggest practical joker at Black House?
The fighters. I mean, all of us, a lot of guys are jokers, man, but I would probably have to say Anderson. But undercover, Lyoto's a pretty big joker, too, but he just doesn't seem like it. But I think overall, I would say that. And then, you know what? And Glover is, too. I mean, there's a lot of them, man. There's a lot of them.
Sounds like fun. Now, Ed, in the documentary Like Water, there's a moment when Anderson's doing a phone conference, and when asked, "What have you been doing? Have you been doing anything new?" He answers that he's been training with Steven Seagal. The look on your face is priceless. I can't tell whether it's a look of shock or just laughter. Did you know at that point that Anderson had actually aligned himself with Steven Seagal?
Well, I knew that he was training with Steven Seagal, and I just thought it was a kick that out of all the different things he was doing, that's what he mentioned. You know what I'm saying? And I can't tell you that him training with Steven Seagal didn't. Maybe what he trained with Steven Seagal didn't completely affect that fight, but I can tell you this. He did, I did see Steven Seagal and him training that kick that he knocked out Vitor with. I'm not saying Steven Seagal taught him that kick. No, I'm not. But I can say that maybe Steven Seagal made some adjustments in his kick that maybe helped him score that knockout. That's not saying anything too far-fetched.
Wow. Now, Ed, take us into your life. What's the most difficult thing about being, such a high-profile MMA manager?
Man, there's a lot of hard things about it. You never really have a schedule. You're pretty much you're working 24/7. You don't really have hours. But you got to love what you do, and fortunately, I love what I do. Yes, there's shitty times you go through, and there's bad times, but at the end of the day, man, I love what I do, and that's really what's important. So, there are some bad things that you have to come across. There's so many different little things that you have to deal with, but in the end, I feel very fortunate and blessed to be able to make a living doing something I love.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of living, Lyoto Machida lived in Brazil for a long, long time, and he's now moved out to sunny California. What's Lyoto's favorite thing? What's Lyoto's favorite thing about living in California?
Well, he loves the weather. We paddleboard all the time together, him and I.
He's got the new look as well. Ed, when will we see Big Nog back in the octagon? Will it be soon?
I don't know when we'll see. We'll have to sit down and talk with them. Probably not until next year.
Now, Ed, we're all excited. Obviously, Anderson Silva and Nick Diaz. In your opinion, how is Anderson beating Nick Diaz?
Well, I think it's going to be a stand-up war, and I think it's going to be a very exciting fight. But, because it's going to be a stand-up war, he's probably going to knock him out.
And finally, Ed, when it's all said and done, what would you say has been the biggest career highlight as an MMA manager in your career thus far?
Man, I would have to say one of the big highlights was probably when, I've had so many, to be honest with you. I'm so fortunate that I have to say that I've had many in my life, and I'm very fortunate for that. But I think the one that started it off would probably be the one that I would say was probably the most life-changing, and that's when Anderson Silva beat Rich Franklin for the first time.
Yeah, no one's going to forget that moment anytime soon. Guys, you can catch Ed on Twitter at Ed Blackhouse, and obviously go to rfafighting.com for the latest on any upcoming RFA events and news. Ed, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming down.
Thank you, man. Take care.
This is Randy Couture, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Alright, guys, our next guest is one of the most elite MMA fighters in the light heavyweight division in the world. He is a former Strikeforce light heavyweight champion. He is currently in Bellator. He's got a big fight coming up on Bellator 123 on September 5th. He is none other than King Mo. King Mo, welcome to Submission Radio. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on, dog.
Oh, it's absolutely our pleasure. Now, let's get to your big fight. You know, for a while now, you were set to face Tom DeBlas at Bellator 123. He's now out with a knee injury, and your new opponent, Marcus Souza, he's in. How much do you know about Marcus, and how much of a difference does the opponent change make for you?
Well, here's the thing. The opponent change don't matter because whoever's going to fight me, I'm fighting to knock him out. I'm fighting to put, I promote violence. So I'm trying to go out there and do my damage and win the fight. You know what I'm saying? Promoting violence, baby. You know what I'm saying? But, Tom DeBlas, he was the original opponent. Knee injury came about, shut that fight down. But I was training for him, using my boxing and using my submission defense because he's pretty good off his back. Now we have Marcus Souza, who was a kickboxer, and he knows the submissions. So I have to be sharp, and he's kind of a tough guy, trying to knock you out. I've known of him since high school because we're both from the state of Texas. So I know of him. I don't really know him like that, but I know of him. So, I know he fights in Glory. I know he does MMA here and there, but he's a kickboxer by trade. So I know that I'm looking for a good fight.
Absolutely, King Mo. Now, Marcus Souza will be spending his 3 weeks training camp moving between Reign Training Center, Kings MMA, and Glory Gym. However, you are training at American Top Team with the Dive Team. Tell us about how training has been going so far and how you're enjoying your camp at ATT.
Man, training's been going hard, man. I've been going hard, man. I got Laborio here, Tammy Barzini, Brian Harris, Coach Catal, Coach Macahome, Coach Conan. We got so many coaches, you know what I'm saying? Pahumpa, Everton. We always got eyes on us. Coach Mikey Rod, Coach Diane Davis. I got Jeff Mayweather out here with me too, my boxing coach. So I'm getting what I need, man. I'm gonna be prepared for this fight, and my conditioning feels great, my body feels good, and I'm ready to do damage.
Awesome. Now, Kingmo, in your last fight against Rampage Jackson, you had a very close decision that many, many people feel that you won. In terms of progression and your skill set, what did you learn from that fight, and what did you work on from that fight?
Well, going to the fight, things we worked on, everything got thrown out the window because I was slipping. Like my stand-up, I couldn't keep my footing. My shots weren't. I could shoot. I could shoot to get forward, but it was just awkward because, there were times I'd shoot and I'm going to track at the corner, I would slide off of them. So the things I worked on, I really couldn't really implement. So I had to stick with wrestling and stick with try to control him because I wanted to throw more ground and pound shots on, but he's going to get back up. So I was like, okay, let me control. Let me frustrate. Let me let my shots here. Let me pick my shots. And see what I could do. But when it comes down to it, MMA media, 90% of MMA media haven't won the fight. People that know MMA know I won the fight. It's just that, I got people that don't like me because I keep it real. I keep it 100. I'm a straight shooter. And they don't like that. They want me to be something I'm not. And those people were happy to see me lose, or people that were, on Rampage's, shock. They thought that he won, but really, if you watch the fight, anytime a man asks for a rematch, 10 out of 10 times tells you that guy lost the fight. And he asked me for a rematch before the results were read. He's like, hey, man, I want a rematch. Before the results were read. So, that says a lot about what he is thinking going to the decision. So, it is what it is.
Now, the word on the street, King Mo, is that the old canvas is coming back and Scott Coker is making that a reality. Are you happy about that? And, with the old canvas coming back, would you be looking to rematch Rampage if everything goes well with Marcus Souza in the future?
I'll be back for any time. Anyway, it's got a dirt canvas. But I'm happy that, Coker got rid of this canvas because I'm not the only one that's complaining about it. I feel like canvases everywhere, in every organization are kind of subpar. But I'll tell you this, when I fought the Strike Force, that canvas was pretty good. I didn't have a problem slipping. I felt like, I felt good. I felt like, I was fighting on some good grip where I was fighting on. But I'm open to fighting Quinn against, he asked me for a rematch. Well, I'll grant him a rematch. It's up to him, say if he wants to fight anymore because just looking at him, I don't think his heart's in the fighting. I think that after fighting me, I think that he knows he didn't beat me, and I don't think he wants to fight anymore.
Interesting. Now, we know you're the kind of guy you like to get in there. The opponent doesn't really matter too much. You're like a lot of guys. You like to get paid. And looking towards the future, assuming that all goes well and you win against Marcus Scherzer, who's somebody else that you'd like to face? Maybe a guy like a Tito, or is there anyone else that you've got your eyes set on?
Whoever, Tito, if you Newton, Avery, whoever. That's why I get paid and then get that belt. My goal is to stay healthy and paid and get the belt. It's my goals. And improve as a fighter. So.
Absolutely. Those are some great goals to have. And now, King Mo, it's no secret that you weren't a big fan of Bjorn Rebney, and a lot of people, including yourself, were really happy when Scott Coker came on board. How much of a chance have you had to talk to Scott in regards to any ideas that you had for the company? And, what do you think this really means for the Bellator brand going into the future?
Well, I think that with Coker taking over Bellator, it brings more credibility to the organization. And he brings more credibility and brings more eyes because people recognize that he helped build Strikeforce from a regional promotion to a nationwide promotion. Now, here's the funny thing. People think that he's people think that, all Coker's going to do is run Strikeforce stick around and Bellator stick around and the UFC's going to purchase it. Well, people don't realize that Viacom, which owns Bellator, has more money than the UFC. There's no way they're going to sell to the UFC. If anything, Viacom could possibly buy the UFC. People just don't. The thing is, people don't do their research, so they just hear what certain people are saying on the internet and they just run with it. Do your research before you start talking to people.
Now, Kimo, we know you're a big pro wrestling fan, as are we. Now, I'm sure you'll appreciate this analogy. Back in the day, you obviously had the WWF and you had WCW, and WCW was sort of this unstoppable juggernaut, and yet the WWF ended up winning the Monday Night Wars and taking over. Do you think something similar could happen in terms of the UFC being this massive juggernaut, and possibly Bellator could get the leg up in a few more years?
Anything's possible because it's like this. The way MMA is looking, I don't think it's looking that bright right now. The future of MMA is kind of muggy because the market's being oversaturated. People they have all these shows, have these pay-per-views. They're trying to get money from all these people, and they're putting on subpar shows. You know what I'm saying? A lot of organizations are. I think that eventually things have to change. Have less shows, more quality, and they'll do better.
Absolutely, King Mo. Now, speaking of companies, TNA is one of uncertain future. It was only recently that they brought you back on TV, and now the future is unknown for them. What do you think is going on with the company? And will we be seeing more of you on Impact now that the Spike TV deal, it looks like it's not going to be happening?
I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm hoping the Spike TV deal happens. I'm pretty sure Dixie has people on it. I went to wrestle school. I can wrestle matches. I'm just hoping that things get situated so I can go back on Impact to show the wrestling world that King Mo knows what he's doing in the square circle. Because when it comes down to it, I put my work in Ohio Valley Wrestling. And, I want to show off what I've learned.
Yeah, absolutely. And, everybody knows that obviously MMA is tough because it is real fighting. You're really getting punched in the face and you're really trying to, beat a guy. But pro wrestling, the lifestyle, the schedule, things like that is extremely tough as well. In your opinion, for a lot of the fans that may not know that much about pro wrestling, tell us about, how tough pro wrestling is compared to MMA.
Pro wrestling is harder than MMA. Here's the reason why. In MMA, I can avoid damage. I can circle. I can pull guard. I can take you down, give you your back. I can push you to the cage. Hell, I can tap. I can verbally give up. In pro wrestling, I've seen guys tear their ACL and continue to wrestle solely to please the crowd. Regardless of what happens, the show must go on. You're out there. People are there at one point. They're wrestling like 3 times a week, 4 times a week. You see Hulk Hogan did a double leg drop. Shrunk his spine, but guess what? He was still doing it. Your body is banged up. You're taking bumps. You're falling over the ropes, through the ropes, hitting the ropes, hitting the turnbuckle, getting body slam, taking the bump. That stuff breaks your body down. And you get a wrestler that's 47 years old, and you get an MMA fighter that's 47 years old. The wrestler looks like he's 60, compared to the MMA fighter. You get Randy Couture and compare him to someone like The Undertaker. Undertaker was a little older, but I guarantee you, The Undertaker at 48 years old was far more beat up than what Randy Couture was.
Absolutely. The natural looking good for his age. Now, King Mo, your manager, King Mo, he's been on our show a couple of, sorry, King Mo. Your manager, Mike Hogan, he's been on our show a couple of times. And, managers are often in the background and sometimes don't get the credit they deserve. Mike seems very hands-on with his clients and said it in the past how his wife has actually helped you do your laundry while you're preparing for a fight. Tell us, how much of an influence has Mike had on your career, so far?
He's Mike's like a coach, life coach, everything. Mike's like family. He's family. He's my big brother, man. I talk to Mike at least 5 times a day. If I don't hear from him, something's wrong. If he's there for me, something's wrong. I talk to that man every day. You know what I'm saying? Every day. There's not a day I go by without talking to him. That's my brother. When he says something, I listen to it. I trust his word. I trust his opinion. Everything. Everything Mike says is true to me.
Yeah, Mike's very much a straight shooter, and it's important to have people like that in your life. I also wanted to ask you, King Mo, in terms of wrestling, you recently got to meet and hang out with a lot of guys. Guys like Rikishi, X-Pac, Tommy Dreamer, Chris Masters, Ron Simmons.
Yeah.
What was it like for you meeting guys like that, and does it bring the inner fan out in you?
Man, let me tell you something. I'm almost famous. I met Ric Flair again, Roddy Piper. I met Goldberg. He actually knew who I was. I was like, oh my God, Goldberg. I met beautiful Bobby Eaton. The Hall of Fame, I met him, the Rikishi, the Walls of Mullins. Man, X-Pac boy, Gangrel is cool, Ron Simmons is cool, Green Tea Oakland. Balls Mahoney. It was crazy, man. Chris Masters was real cool. I just know, I didn't know what to do. My head was spinning out there, man. My head was spinning. I was like, oh my gosh, I mean, nice, cool people. I don't want to be like a groupie, but I kind of am. So I grew up watching people back when some of these guys were wrestling NWA. Yeah. They would turn WCW, I'm ECW. Tommy Dreamer was cool, man. I don't know, man. It was a blessing, man. I hope that can happen again sometime.
Now, King Mo, we let the fans know you're coming on our show. We've got a couple of fan questions that we're going to ask you. The first one comes from Derek 63. He'd like to know what your opinion is on MMA pay right now. Obviously, you're very smart when it comes to yourself getting a great contract deal. But what do you think about MMA pay as it stands, especially when it comes to UFC and other organizations? Do you think fighters are getting paid enough considering how much money they're drawing for the companies?
I don't think they are. And the thing is, here's the reason why. Here's the problem with that. Some of these fans, they're stupid because they're like, well, Dana White or Bjorn or blah, blah, said that, you should be happy for that. No, you shouldn't be happy for that. That'd be like me saying, hey, you go to McDonald's, you should be happy for your pay. It's never good enough. I'll put it like this. I watch boxing, and I see there's a boxer out there from Australia, up-and-coming heavyweight, Lucas Brown, doing his thing. You know what I'm saying? And I know he called Deontay Wilder, Lucas is skilled. You can ask him. In boxing, what happens is you get your show money, and whatever you make, win or lose, what you get. I feel like that'd be better because if you tell a fighter, hey, you gotta make 75 or 75, well, guess what? The fighter's gonna be like, you know what? I gotta win, so I'm gonna go out there and just win. When we tell a fighter, hey, I'm gonna give you 150 straight up. Then you just go out there and fight. You have no worries. There's no worries. Just go out there and fight. Just instead of the win bonus, no, just give them the pay bonus. Now it's like this: if they get a knockout, they give them a little extra. But if they go out to the fight, that's good enough. Pay them the money.
Just on that, with the whole, show bonus and win bonus in MMA, do you think that's motivation? Like, do you think if it was just, say, show bonus and it was all the same, do you think we'd see, maybe fights not as good because guys wouldn't be as motivated, or how do you think that works?
I think you see fights that are better. Because the thing is, it's like this. If you're going out there to win, if you're going out there going for blow to win, well, guess what? If you get knocked out, guess what happens? You try hard, but you got knocked out and you lost. Now, if you go into the smart game plan, stick to it, most likely you'll win. But guess what? People use game plans tend to be boring because I don't think MMA fans appreciate a good game plan. You see it in rugby, you see it in soccer, you see game plans in American football, basketball, all sorts of sports. But for some reason, MMA, you get penalized when you use a game plan. Well, it's like this. If you give a guy $150,000, hey, I'm gonna pay you your whole purse right there, bam, $150. You're gonna see them most likely go for broke or fight. They'll fight. They'll be more active fight. Look at boxing. Boxing is a perfect example. People out there, they're not getting paid a show and win bonuses. They're getting paid the show money. The show money, all it made to bond is their show and win bonus. They're going to the fight. They're going to put on a show. That's what it is. MMA is not really it's not a true sport. Because if it's a true sport, and people that win, use game plans, regardless if it's like a lay and pray win or a wall and stall win, they still get acknowledged. In soccer games are 1-0. They go a whole hour and a half, but no one's scoring. It's 1-0 or 0-0, draw. And guess what? People are still there. People respect it. MMA, if you're boring, they don't like it. You know what I'm saying? True sports, all that matters is the result, not how you win. The result is all that matters in true sports. That's it. MMA is entertainment. Sports entertainment. It's like real wrestling. That's it.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. It'd be interesting to see if it does happen in the future. Now, Rager has a question. Rager wants to know, you spent time in OVW after college wrestling. What made you decide to leave pro wrestling and go to MMA? And would you ever want to go to the WWE in the future?
Well, here's the thing, right? When I was at the Olympic trials, I went to OVW, and they offered me a contract. And I was like, I want to go, but then I was thinking, hey, you know what? I want to be like a two-time Kurt Angle, or whatever like that. I want to be the Olympic champion, then go to MMA, be a champion, then go to pro wrestling. So I was like, that'd be perfect, because then no one else has done that, because Kurt Angle came in and be Olympic champion, so I wanted to win up him. That's what my goal was. You know, and I loved it, man. It was great. I was up there with Mark Henry, Sky Too High the Worm, Gail Kim was out there, Nathan Jones was out there. It was like surreal. Carlito Cool. I was out there, man. It was fun, man. And you know, but I like the WWE, but I'm a TNA person. You know, I feel like top to bottom, TNA has better wrestling. Now, WWE might have a better show as far as atmosphere. It's been around longer, but I feel like top to bottom, TNA has better wrestling. Like, I'm like WWE has great wrestlers like Ambrose and Rollins and the Shield and some other guys and Cesaro. They're great, but if you look at the whole card, you see some matches that are like, boring. Yeah. See promos, too much talking. I feel myself like, well, I watch both. I fast forward most through WWE because the promos are so long. They're talking, cut promos, and like fast forward. Okay, you wasted 45 minutes. There could be like 3 matches. You know what I'm saying? Well, with TNA, you have a promo here. We do have matches, small promo, more matches, and the promos are tend to be shorter in TNA. And WWE for Raw, do a 3-hour show, so they're going to fill it. They have a bunch of fillers in there, commercials, promos, and that's it.
Yeah, I got another. Sorry, King Mo. I got another fan question for you up next. But just while we're on the wrestling topic, I was just wondering. I wanted to get your opinion on what did you think about the way the WWE using Brock Lesnar? Obviously, he had that fight at SummerSlam. I don't know if you saw against John Cena, whereas probably one of the most dominant title fights I've ever seen in pro wrestling before. What do you think of the way they're using Lesnar and using Heyman with them as well? Are you a fan of it?
Yeah, I love it because here's the thing, right? Right now John Cena just put Brock Lesnar over, big time. So now Brock should ride a wave. Whoever beats Brock is going to be the next big face of the WWE. Because for him to dominate John Cena like that, whoever beats Brock has to be the man. It's going to be like Roman Reigns or maybe Cesaro. It's going to be somebody that they want to give a big push to. So, it makes sense. They're probably creative what they're doing. It's even in TNA, like when they do something like that, they do it for a reason. A lot of fans don't get it, but in the long run, it makes a lot of sense.
Very smart. The mind of a booker. Now, what we're going to do with you, King Mo, is something that we call the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. Basically, we fire off a whole bunch of questions, have a bit of fun, and you answer them as quickly as possible. The first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Actually, wait, sorry. Just quickly, Dennis, did you have one more question?
Yeah, sorry. I just had one more question here, Cass. Louis Slam would like to know, King Mo, what do you think of the MMA judging situation at the moment? Obviously, the Rampage Jackson fight was very close. It was a bit of a curious judge's decision. Do you think this is something that's affecting the sport right now, more prominent than ever? And what do you think needs to be done to change the situation?
I feel like judges have to go to seminars every 3 months, like MMA seminars, where they learn how the techniques, learn what a proper kick is, what a proper submission is. Because sometimes you feel like I could knock out a head and arm, and it could be loose, but the coach, the referee, the judges can be like, you know what? Oh, let me score points for that because it looks like he's choking them. When in actuality, it's not doing a damn thing. So, when it comes down to it, I feel like the judges should go through seminars. They should explain, they should have like little seminars, and where they go in there, learn the moves, demonstrate the moves, and then explain, they should all sit together and watch fights, explain why they scored rounds for certain people and what their rationale is.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. You know what? We've had a lot of guests on the show who say very similar things, so we're just sort of wondering, when all that's going to happen and when we're going to see a better class of judging. But now, King Mo, we're going to do the tap-out round, so we'll start now if you're ready. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, apart from your own, what's the best finisher in pro wrestling?
That's the curb stomp.
All right.
Ooh. What's been your favorite fight that you've had so far?
All of them, all of them, because I like to fight.
Okay, good answer. You love your music and you love to support and represent local artists. Tell us what song we'll be seeing you enter to on September 5th.
It is, okay, I think I'm going to collect this song called Busted N-Word Shit. That's, because it's by Scotty Kane. If you're on YouTube, it's called Busta Nicka, and it's Nikka shit.
All right.
Bust with a mouth.
Now, King Mo, do you think PEDs are a problem in MMA, and is it something that worries you sometimes when going into fights?
Well, I feel like they're a problem in all sports. You see, I feel a drug test for a banned substance by over the counter, and you just never know what you're going to get, and some people are purposely doing it, taking stuff from doctors, but I think that you never know if it's a problem until people get caught, and right now, you're seeing people get caught, but the thing is that it's not that many people. I really don't know because I know American Top Team, a lot of fighters here, and the fighters I know are clean. So, I can't speak for everybody else, but I just know that, people get caught, so people don't.
Mm. Now, King Mo, will you get a picture with Great Muta the next time he walks past you?
Man, I don't know about that, man. I was so scared. You know what? I'm going to try, but I was so scared. He walked right past me, he stood beside me, and I looked at him, and then I held it down because we made eye contact, and I was scared. So I looked away, and I was like, I started shaking, man. I didn't want to get spit on, just the green mist.
Now, King Mo, how many crowns does King Mo really own?
You know what? I buy customers, and I usually give them away after every fight, or I just use them. I usually buy one at a time. It costs about $300, but I don't know. I only have one right now because I just ordered it.
Well, fun fact, back in the day, somebody once stole Sting's suitcase with his leather coat and everything, so make sure you hold on to those crowns. Now, King Mo, what's your first memory of professional wrestling?
Oh, man, I have so many, but my first big memory is Clash of Champions, Ric Flair versus Sting. I'm not a religious person, but I went. My mom was Muslim, and these Christians came by talking to her, if you want something bad enough, you'll pray for it. So I stayed up all night praying. I was like, God, if you love me, please let Sting win this belt. Please let Sting beat Ric Flair. Please, please, please. I prayed, not even asleep. The next day, I went to my cousin's house. It was a draw. I was so mad. I think God hates me. God hates me. I was like, how are you going to let Sting fight Ric Flair and let it be a draw? Let time run out. I was like, man, God hates
me. Me and Casper have had a few run-ins with Ric Flair over the years. Most recently, about a month ago, he refereed a match here in Melbourne, so that was pretty cool to see. Now, wanting to be in the Olympics is one of your goals for wrestling. Do you think that MMA needs to be included as a sport in the Olympics?
You know what? don't think it works because it's just too. I don't know. It's big, but it's not organized enough because in wrestling and other sports, all the governing bodies work together. In MMA, you have organizations, so they all want their own cut. You have Bellator, you have UFC, you have UFC, you have Worlds of Fighting, you have Legacy, you have Invicta, you have all these organizations, and MFC in Canada. Who's going to work together? None of them will co-promote. They won't work together. So that's why MMA will never work. It'll never work in the Olympics because no one's going to work together.
Now, King Mo, what's the best advice you've ever gotten as a fighter or a wrestler?
As a fighter, well, Kevin Jackson was like, relax, breathe, and work. Do what you were trained to do when you fight or when you compete. You know what I'm saying? He's like, so all you can do is like, don't put pressure on yourself. You have it there because you won't win. But just go out there and do what you're trained to do, and the rest will come.
Now, King Mo, it's prediction time. How is Roy Nelson beating Mark Hunt at UFC Japan?
Submission. Because Mark Hunt has a chin. Mark Hunt's a beast. Man, you know what I'm saying? I'd hate to hit him. I'd hate to punch him because he has like a chin of granite. He might break my hand, and I'd hate to fight him because he's quick and he can make you look bad. You know what I'm saying? So, Sensei Roy has to submit him because granted Roy hits hard, but I just don't see any punch. The only person I've seen knock out Mark Hunt and hurt Mark Hunt was Nurmagomedov. I was there. I think more than anything, he was surprised he went into 2 punches, a right hand left hook combo. But other than that, man, Mark's just smooth, man. You just got to submit that dude, man. Mark's a beast. I respect him. You know what I'm saying? He's a true fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we love him. And of course, because he's, a Kiwi, but technically he's in Australia, so we're obviously going to be going for Mark. Now, King Mo, what's a secret hobby that fans don't know about you? That's something that you do.
Really, man, I don't know. I don't really have no hobbies, really. I like Dave & Buster's, playing video games. That's about it.
And finally, King Mo, how are you planning on beating Marcus Souza at Bellator 123?
Bust him in his shit, man. Bust him in his shit. That's what I'm going to do. Bust him in the So, hey, one way or the other, he's going to have to lay down.
Well, there you go. The official prediction is bust him in the shit. So, guys, don't forget to catch that fight. King Mo will be taking on Marcus Souza at Bellator 123 on September 5th here in Australia because we're in the future. It's going to be September 6th. It's going to be the Mohegan Sun Arena in Uncasville, Connecticut. The event will be live on Spike TV if you're in America. And, of course, don't forget to follow King Mo on Twitter at KingMoFH. And we'll be throwing up the link as well. King Mo, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming down.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
What an interview with King Mo. Such a laid-back, cool guy. Sometimes gets a bad rep from, the MMA media. Sometimes they say that he's a bit standoffish, but, couldn't have been a nicer guy to us. And we're really excited to see what happens at Bellator 123. Definitely excited to see some of the matchups that he's going to have in the future. And, it was fun to talk a little bit of pro wrestling. I know we got, a big MMA crowd of listeners, but, sometimes chat a little bit about pro wrestling. It's obvious it's King Mo's passion. It's crazy how passionate about it he is. Isn't that right, Cass?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of guys like us, we really used to be big in pro wrestling. We feel that it's kind of forgotten us, like a lot of fans. I think even the other day, Dennis, you were talking about how you played a little bit of a 2000 SmackDown from back in the day, and it was just sick to watch, and now it's a little bit changed. But, great to chat to King Mo, great to reminisce about all that kind of stuff. But moving forward, 2 big cards over the weekend. Obviously, UFC Fight Night, Bisping versus Lee, and then Fight Night in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Benson Henderson against Rafael Dos Anjos. And we got a lot to talk about because there was a lot of big fights, wasn't there, Dennis?
Yeah, a lot of big fights, and kicking off the Bisping versus Lee main card was one of our Aussies, wasn't that right, Cass?
Yeah, it was. Well, actually, prior to the Aussies, you had Ning. I'm trying to read this name because honestly, it's a tough one. I'm gonna attempt it. Ning Guangyu versus Yang Jipang. watching it all last night, I should know these names, but this is an interesting fight. Before the Badger O'Reilly fight, these guys, I don't know, man, the crowd really hated this fight. They really didn't like what they were seeing. I thought these guys are warriors. I thought these guys are really going at it, showing a lot of tenacity. There was a bit of circling at times, but I really didn't mind the fight at all. The decision did go to Ning Gang-yu. This was obviously the Ultimate Fighter finale from Tough China. There was an injury and the fight had to be sidelined. I think originally the fight was supposed to happen in March, so, never happened before. It was pretty crazy. Dennis, what did you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it was a very exciting fight to watch. The crowd, they weren't as into it as they could be, but I thought it was a great fight to watch and a good way to kick off the card.
Yeah, and then after that we had Zhang Lipeng against one of our fellow Aussies, not only Aussies but fellow Melburnian, originally born in Brisbane, Brendan the Badger O'Reilly. Things didn't quite go Brendan's way, and Zhang Lipeng did take the unanimous decision. I was actually surprised because Brendan did win some tournaments, some amateur tournaments in wrestling here in Australia. And I was surprised because I really didn't see that wrestling in the fight. He was really shooting from very far out, not really setting up those takedowns all that much. And for a guy like Zhang, not to take anything away from him, but China's not known for exactly having the greatest wrestlers. Neither is Australia by any stretch of the imagination. I can't wait for the day that wrestling really gets put into Australian schools, maybe even jiu-jitsu would be great. But anyway, I digress. China, definitely not a nation which really embraces wrestling. They're more about their striking martial arts. So the fact that Brendan, really got outclassed here by Zhang, I was a little bit surprised. I was thinking, if anything, now that he's coming down to his natural weight class of 155, as opposed to Tough Nations where he competed at welterweight, I really thought he had the advantage here. Unfortunately not. We saw a very complete Zhang Lipeng, and, he really put a beating on Brendan O'Reilly, really busted up that lip. I don't know whether that was thanks to Zhang or Brendan, just put his own tooth through it, but, a lot of blood, and, definitely didn't go the Aussies' way. What did you think of this one, Dennis?
Yeah, I was really disappointed with the Badger. He came out, he looked good in the first round. He got that, he was going for that takedown, but then he made a fatal mistake, ended up on the bottom, struggled to get out from underneath of Liang, and, it kind of seemed like he got a little bit tired in that second round. The first round was a little bit, back and forth. It was a close one to call, but the second one was a tough one for him. He I was very surprised. He let Liang get those underhooks up against the fence. I thought, as someone like you mentioned who's won some amateur wrestling tournaments here in Australia, he'd avoid, sort of making some basic mistakes there. Liang, you got to give it to him, some great body triangles as he was going for that rear naked choke in the second. In the third, the Badger looked pretty tired. He looked slow. His striking was a bit flat. He's flat-footed. Yeah, he did take that weird shot where it looked like he was going to spear Liang. Do you remember that one from the third round? Sort of rushed in. I wasn't really sure what the hell was going on there. I suppose he was trying to take him down, but there was no chance that was going to work. And yeah, I was just a little bit disappointed for the Badger. I feel like he's had a bit of a rough run. In the Ultimate Fighter, he lost early on, couldn't really show what he was made of. In this one, it wasn't very impressive either. And I feel like he has something to show the people. So hopefully the UFC hang on to him for another Australian card, and he has an opportunity to show off some of his skills. But yeah, very disappointed for the Badger.
Yeah, absolutely. We need as many Aussies in the UFC as possible, and we need that next golden boy. You know what I mean? We had in the past. Who did we have? We had. Wow, awkward pause. We really need. We had a few prospects. James Tahuna was really coming up, and he's been derailed. Kyle Noak, he showed some promise, and he's been derailed. Mark Hunt is basically the closest thing we have, and
we'll claim him. We'll claim Mark Hunt.
Well, he's claimed us, so I think it's only fair. He was the closest we had. I mean, he almost got that title shot. It would have been crazy. Roofs would have been blown off houses had that happened, and had he beaten JDS. But we really need that guy, and. Hey, Jake Matthews could be that next guy, but I really want to see Badger O'Reilly with another shot back in the UFC. I really think he does have more to prove.
Yeah, and Badger looked in good shape. He looked big, but he just looked very flat on his feet. I think maybe it's a bit of a jitter thing, you know. He's a young guy. He's had, you know, 5 or 6 fights in MMA. So yeah, hopefully you know, he'll be able to go back to the drawing board and come out with a strong performance. You know, who knows? Maybe we'll have him on the show and have a chat about it later.
Speaking of strong performances, Tyron Woodley versus Dong Hyun Kim co-main event. I know a lot of people in the arena and on Twitter, the Twitterverse was saying they were a little bit sleepy. It was a tough night of fights. I was honestly enjoying it. Maybe it's because we had an Aussie in the second fight, and I thought it was a pretty good fight in the first fight. But if anything, this is definitely one to wake you up. Tyron Woodley demolished Dong Hyun Kim coming into that fight. But you know what? Let's talk about what we thought was going to happen. Coming into that fight, how did you think it was going to go, Dennis?
Yeah, no, that's a great question there, Cass. You know, I did think that Woodley was going to have the advantage. I thought his wrestling would nullify Kim's judo, and I thought, you know, some of his explosive shots would, you know, lead to a TKO, but possibly sort of in the second round. I didn't expect what happened in this fight. What did you think?
Yeah, you know, I thought that Tyron really needed to make a statement after his last fight against Rory Mack. You know, things didn't go his way. In fact, he really didn't look good at all in that fight. And, you know, blessing in disguise, he was originally meant to be Hector Lombard taking on Dong Hyun Kim. The guys are obviously, I wouldn't really say training partners, but they do both train at American Top Team. Not the closest of guys, but obviously they do train there at American Top Team. You know, Hector Lombard's out, and now Tyron Woodley, you know, enters that fight. And I thought, you know, this is a really great opportunity for this guy to make a statement. Obviously, in his hometown of Ferguson, there's a lot of things going on, including riots, things like that. Prior to the fight, his coaches, if you looked at his Twitter, there was a lot of videos of, you know, stores and things getting busted up in his hometown, which is a massive, distraction for a fighter. I don't know whether Tyron's family was there. Anyway, long story short, I was very interested to see how Tyron would cope with that kind of pressure and distraction, knowing that he needs to make a statement to get back into title contention. Because prior to that Rory Mack fight, you know, people were saying he might be, you know, a future champion, things like that. Dong Hyun Kim on the other side, obviously great judo, good grappler. You know, he used to really grind out victories. And in the last couple of fights, he's become an absolute brawler. You know, who can forget that fight against John Hathaway? Really sloppy fight, but he obviously got that amazing spinning back elbow for the TKO. Honestly, against a guy like Tyron, I really didn't think that would work, and sure enough, it didn't. It almost looked like Dong Hyun Kim lost his balance when he was doing that spinning back, I don't know, elbow, fist, whatever he was going for. It looked really telegraphed. It came out from very, very far out. He didn't even have the distance right for it, and Tyron actually clipped him with a massive right hand, a massive right hook, and from there on, it basically spelled disaster from Dong Hyun Kim. What did you think, Dennis, of the fight?
Well, you know, I'll tell you what. The start of the fight was pretty neck and neck. You know, Kim was up against the fence. He was sort of working a little bit of his judo. Woodley was, you know, going for some wrestling there, and you know, just before that, Kim just rushes to Woodley. Woodley's like, "Whoa, all right, I guess it's on." But then, you know, Kim is a victim, as you mentioned, of that spinning back fist elbow, and this spinning back fist elbow is like a drug to fighters, I feel. It's like when you play, anybody who plays video games, when you play NBA 2K14 and you get 1 3-point shot in, and then for the rest of the, anytime you play again, you always go for a 3-point shot and you end up losing. Well, that's what it is. It's very difficult to get. Once you do get it, fighters have the tendency to throw it, and a lot of the times they are misbalanced, they fall down and they lose the fight. I don't want to mention Chael Sonnen. I don't know what the hell he was doing against Anderson Silva. I was watching one of those prime times that he was pretty much just practicing that one move over and over in the octagon. I was like, dude, that looks horrible. I don't know what's going on through your head. But yeah, it's a horrible move. I think if you're a coach, if you're an MMA coach, you go, look, it's a high-risk move. You know, you got to be really, really careful with it. You might lose balance. You might lose. You left open. You know, just be careful with this move. And I think just Kim was just too over anxious in this fight. I think he needed to relax a bit more, and you know, then things would have played out maybe a bit differently. But yeah, Woodley really capitalized with that punch and some devastating ground and pound there. And yeah, great stuff for Woodley. Also thought that Woodley looked a little bit more lean in this fight. I don't know, maybe it was just from the angle I was watching. One of the things about this card was because it was shot in Macau, it looked a lot different from the usual UFC cards. And that kind of knocked me off a bit. You know, me and you, Cass, you know, we're students of entertainment, I like to say. We're students of the game when it comes to the way things are shot, the way they look. You know, we're down to the very last detail. And, you know, I didn't feel I didn't feel that UFC production value as much as I usually do in this card. And I don't want to say that it bothered me, but it was definitely a different experience watching it at home for me.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, it's not something that I thought about too much, but subconsciously, now that you mention it, I definitely did notice it. Sort of felt a bit like Dream to me. Not completely, but yeah, I think a lot of it just had to do with the lighting in the arena. And maybe just the arena layout. It definitely felt different. When you watch it, you definitely don't feel like you're in Vegas or anything like that. You feel like you're somewhere around the world, like, maybe Abu Dhabi or somewhere else. Just on the Tyron Woodley and Dong Hyun Kim fight, I really think that from a structural point of view, to do a spinning back elbow or something like, I think if you're going to do a spinning back fist, you should probably have somewhat short arms so you can generate a lot of power. If you're going to do a spinning back elbow, you need long arms. Now, Dong Hyun Kim does have long arms. I don't think anyone's had more success with the spinning back elbow than John Jones. It's really a signature of his arsenal. And he doesn't even hit those as much as he used to because people do kind of expect him. But I think with Dong Hyun Kim, he should have paced himself a little bit more, not really gone out guns blazing. I don't know why he did that. I don't know whether he was trying to entertain the crowd or what, but I think maybe he should have saved a move like that for at least later on in the round, if not for later rounds. Like maybe second round where there was a pace established, Tyron Woodley maybe had a rhythm going, or Dong Hyun Kim had a rhythm going, and then bam, you fire out one of those when your opponent's not expecting it. But to sort of fire it off right at the very start when they're sort of feeling each other out, really don't know if that was the greatest idea. And as far as Tyron Woodley goes, I mean, he's an interesting fighter because with Tyron, he's either really scary and absolutely crushing a guy, or he's extremely underwhelming. So I think that's another reason why Tyron's really interesting to watch, because you never know what kind of Tyron's going to show up, and you never know what kind of fight we're going to get with Tyron.
Yeah, and just in that spinning back fist, spinning back elbow, I've seen countless people in my gym break their arm just from doing that move. It's just such a dangerous move, because if you do it and it lands in the part of your elbow, sort of at the back of your elbow where it can hyperextend your arm, it usually breaks people's arms as well. So for anybody that's listening at home who thinks it's one of the most effective moves out there, you really do have to have a whole lot of skill, the right distance, and yeah, it's just a very, very, very risky move. And I agree with you. I don't think it was the right time to throw that, but I suppose Kim was in practice and he was throwing it and knocking guys out with it or something. So he had a lot of confidence in it. But yeah, definitely not something that I'd like to see Kim have a bit more pace in his next fight. I know that he's had a lot of success when he comes at guys and really pushes the pedal to the metal, but I'd like to see him relax a little bit. I'd like to see Kim like that next fight.
Yeah, I would agree. And the other thing is, when you do a spinning attack like that, it's really tough because as a wrestler, as a really explosive guy like Tyron Woodley, he can really easily duck underneath that and take a guy like Kim down, regardless of his judo base. But, congrats to Tyron Woodley. It'll be interesting to see who he fights next. There's been a lot of talks about possibly him and Hector Lombard. And as I mentioned previously, these guys do both train an American Top Team. But when we had Hector Lombard on the show, I think that was at least a couple or 3 even months ago, with Benson Henderson and Bjorn Rebney, he was saying how him and Tyron Woodley, this is Hector Lombard, they don't train together, so they both train at the same facility. He said me and Robbie, I believe more or less, not verbatim, but more or less his words were that him and Robbie, they're cool, and he's okay with Tyron as well. So it kind of gave the impression that they're not super close, not to say that they're enemies, but I don't think they really call or text each other or anything like that. So for them to fight, I don't think it'd be their top priority, but if the UFC really pushed them to, I think they would do it. And I think that'd be a really interesting fight. Hector's judo, Tyron's wrestling, and they're both insane knockout power. As I said on Twitter before, we said on Twitter before, Godzilla versus the Hulk. What would you think, Dennis?
Yeah, it would be a great matchup. But just on a side note, I know a lot of people are really, really impressed with Woodley and for his fight. And I'm sort of going to take a controversial angle on this one. And this is just my opinion. And I know a lot of people won't agree with this, but I wasn't actually that impressed with the fight. I mean, I think Woodley did a great job, but I sort of put it down to a lot of Kim making the huge mistake in the fight and Woodley capitalizing on it. I still want to see Woodley get tested by some of the top guys. So I'm not completely sold on Woodley just yet. I want to see him fight another couple of top guys before I am. But yeah, that would be a huge fight. Definitely a big test for Woodley. And, Hector Lombard, such a beast. It would be a very interesting night of fights.
Dennis, you make a really valid point, because in this case, Dong Hyun Kim, he did have a good stretch at one point, but he's really had mixed results in the cage. So a win over Dong Hyun Kim, I mean, it's not like a win over a top 5 guy or anything like that. Factor in the fact that, Tyron has had some interesting wins. Obviously, the Carlos Condit fiasco of 86, where people were debating for a long time. Was it Tyron who beat him? Was it Condit's injury? So, you know what? You make a really fantastic point. And obviously, in his last fight against Rory Mack, there was an elite guy. And, that was an absolute blunder. You could always give it up that, the wrong Tyron showed up. Everybody has an off night. So, you know what? Great point. And I really look forward to see how Tyron is in his next fight. And that's true. In a minute, it's very hard to tell. When you flash someone and knock them out, it's very hard to see, what you evolved in and things like that. All I can say is a very focused Tyron. He capitalized very well. Not all guys would have, but yeah, very interesting to see his future performances.
Yeah, I mean, my question for Tyron still is, what happens when you drag him out to round 3 and you have a good strategy against him? What kind of Woodley would we see? And I suppose we'll see what happens in the future in his fighting career. But Cass, the main event, the big one, Cung Le versus Michael Bisping. Before we get into this fight, you and me had a bit of a brief chat about this earlier. A lot of people making a big fuss about Cung Le putting up a picture with a filter over it, looking shredded. What were your thoughts when you saw that photo?
Yeah, great. When I first saw it, I was like, Jesus Christ, is that Alistair Overeem? Cung Le looking very impressive for a man aged 42, but a lot of people really took the route of, TRT, steroids, things like that. What is he on? Which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. A lot of these people who are claiming that Cung Le was on something have obviously never gone to the gym in their lives, never picked up a dumbbell, much less doing a proper workout. It's almost as if people forgot, hey, he's actually a professional fighter. That's what he does. The photo was taken in the gym when he was on the pump. He obviously just did a workout. He was saying that I think he jumped on the scales. The dude was sweaty. He took a photo. He flexed. His veins are popping out. Someone snapped the photo. They put a filter over it. Takes about 2 seconds. You can do it on Photoshop or even Instagram. Any idiot can do something like that. And I think people really got fooled by it. Like, oh my God, is he a bodybuilder now or something like that? And I just thought, man, if you go to the gym, like I know when you and I go to the gym, Dennis. If you do like an arm workout, you do back and biceps, your arms are like inflamed to like double the size. You go home, you take a shower, you have a nap, you have something to eat, you watch some TV, and a few hours later, it's like Mario when you get hit by one of those mushrooms and you go back to your normal size. These things happen. So for people to say like, he was on something. Not to mention, I was watching an interview with Cung Le. I think it was on MMA Junkie. Big shout out to them, where he was talking about how every fight he's had in the UFC, he's always had an injury for the Franklin fight. Yeah. He had 3 or 4 surgeries on his elbows. The dude was always injured, and I saw someone on Twitter saying like, how did he get in shape that fast? I'm thinking, what do you mean that fast? He fought Rich Franklin like 2 years ago. What's fast about that, man? He took like a year off. He took a year off, trained his ass off, changed his diet, brought in all these guys, strength and conditioning, this and that, really reevaluated, his training methods, and that's the result. That's the result of hard work. Back in the day, I used to be a waiter. I put on 20 kilos, went from 74 to 94, just going to the gym, eating well and this and that. Of course, I put on some fat, but I'm just saying, that was in 7 months, and I was just a waiter. This guy, he's in Hollywood, he's got, like, access to all the best, nutritionist, Mike Dolce, whatever, these guys, and people think it's crazy for him to make these kind of gains. I don't think so at all. And then, of course, Cung did put a photo up later on of him in his hotel room looking, I wouldn't say deflated, but just not as pumped. Well, that's what happens when you're chilling and walking around. So I think way too much was made of that photo with Cung. Very impressive. Got to give him credit. But for anyone thinking that Cung Le was doing anything dodgy is an absolute moron.
Yeah, that's right. Like you mentioned, Cung did look great in this fight. It's probably one of the best shapes I've seen Cung in a really, really long time. But, exactly right on point with the fact that Cung has always been injured going into at least his UFC fights. And, this is probably the first opportunity he got to really work on his physique, not to mention the guy's a movie star. He works very closely with a whole bunch of personal trainers on his physique, getting into movies and stuff like that. But yeah, it was great to see an in shape Kung Lee. It was definitely cool to see. And, just away from that now, the big fight cast, what did you think how did you think this fight would play out before we even get into what happened?
Look, you know what? I kind of think I got a little bit sold on the fact that, Kung Lee was coming back from a lot of injuries, and he was looking in fantastic shape, and he looked a little bit, like they were saying during the broadcast, he looked a little bit looser during the weigh-ins. I really thought, you know what, this is interesting. We'll see what kind of Kung Lee shows up. Not that I was discounting Michael Bisping at all, but I think maybe I sort of fell into the Kung Lee hype just a little bit too much. I mean, he obviously had some good times in Strikeforce, but let's not be honest, that was years ago. The guy was coming in at 42. He's quite a small middleweight. I mean, he could probably, if he lost some muscle, he could probably compete at welterweight. Not really much of a reach on the guy. Obviously, his reach comes from mostly his kicks. And I kind of thought look, as far as cardio, Kung Lee's never been known for. If he's going to do anything to Michael Bisping, if he's going to win, it's going to be in the first couple of rounds. I would probably give him the first or second round to do it in, and afterwards it's going to be Michael Bisping's world, where, Michael Bisping, he only fought Tim Kennedy not that long ago, a few months ago. He's the fresher man, he's the younger man, he's got reach, and he's got great cardio, and he's probably a little bit more well-rounded, mainly because he's got a much, much, much better ground game. So I kind of thought if he goes anywhere past round 2, it's going to be Michael Bisping's world. Now, before we get into the fight, what did you think was going to happen, Dennis?
Well, just to be blunt, I thought that, if Bisping loses this fight, his eye injury really did change him into a different fighter.
Yeah.
And he's not the same Michael Bisping that we know. And, not taken away from Kung Lee because he's an amazing fighter and his style really is very, very exciting. But, obviously a prime Michael Bisping, I always thought could, like you mentioned, go through Kung Lee just based on the footwork alone. Obviously, Kung Lee's footwork not really there. But, this fight really surprised me. Let's get into it. What did you think, Cass? What did you think of this fight?
Well, I think there were two big takeaways from this fight. One, Michael Bisping's back. He got a TKO. He really needed it. He looked very impressive. I mean, he had a lot of good kicks for Kung Lee, and obviously Kung Lee being the specialist. So Michael Bisping looked fantastic. I think Kung Lee also looked good in his own way just for sheer toughness. I mean, he's a guy at 42 years old, and here's the thing, he doesn't need this. And we put this out on Twitter, Kung Lee has already had a lot of success. He's got success in acting, he's got success in fighting, he's been a champion, he's got money, he's still got his brain intact, he's not slurring his words. The guy's had a lot of success. I mean, I don't know much about banks or anything like that, but he might even have more money than a lot of the guys on the roster. So he doesn't need this, not at 42. And he came in there and he really fought. I mean, anyone who's does a lot of acting, I'm sure they would have given up after, the second round where Kung Lee got beaten up. It took until the 4th round for Michael Bisping to put Kung Lee away. So I was very impressed with Kung Lee, not necessarily from the way he fought, but just his toughness and the fact that, he didn't need this fight. He took it and he fought till the bitter end. What did you think, Dennis?
Absolutely agree with you, Cass. Kung Lee coming out, some amazing kicks across Bisping's stomach. Really hurt Bisping. And unfortunately, Bisping does, land that punch and knuckles Lee in the eye, and Lee has issues with his eye, and then obviously Bisping really capitalizes.
Just quickly on that one, when they show the replay, I don't think any knuckles went in there. They've showed it a few times. I don't know what happened. I don't know whether it was a Josh Koscheck GSP situation, but there was actually never any knuckles in that eye. So it's very strange that Kung Lee was that bothered by it.
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very strange. And then, Bisping capitalizing on that and really, really messing Kung Lee up. I mean, he looked like he was at the end of one of his movies just before, the credits rolled. It was just unbelievable to see. And then, much like you, Casper, just absolutely amazed at the heart and the tenacity of Kung Lee walking through into rounds 3 and 4, not being able to see out of his eye. Let's be honest. He wasn't able to see out of that eye.
Yeah.
Absolutely, his face was absolutely demolished. And what's he doing? He's landing body kicks. He's landing hooks. He's looking great. I mean, I think that if Kung Lee didn't get that messed up early on in the fight, I think he would have had a great chance. He had a lot of great moments in that fight, and he just kept fighting and fighting. Bisping looked good. He had some Amazing kicks, like you mentioned. It looks like he really worked on his kicks. His cardio was great, although he did look a little bit tired in between one of the rounds there. But yeah, Lee was really, really impressed me. I think anybody who says that Lee should retire should reconsider that. I think Lee still has a lot to offer to the MMA community, and if he chooses to keep fighting, I'd love to see him fight at least another couple of fights. Was just really, really impressed with Lee, and just, he did have Bisping on the ropes in certain moments of that fight with some of those body kicks. And, after the fight, Bisping admitted that, some of those body kicks really got to him. It's great to see Bisping back. I don't think the Michael Bisping that we saw in the Kung Lee fight, though, could hang with the top guys. I don't actually rate him as good of a, best way I'm supposed to say it is, I don't rate him to the Michael Bisping before the eye injury just yet. I think he was a little bit better before then, but I think he's on track to returning to his prime. I think Bisping did make a few mistakes there that some better fighters could capitalize on. Just with Kung Lee, I'm just amazed with his style. I mean, obviously, his guard, the way he throws his kicks, leaves him open to punches. Sometimes what Kung Lee does is he ducks in when guys come in with punches, which leaves him really open for really strong punches. And I got to tip my hat to Kung Lee for, hanging on to that style and not, shooting in for a takedown. I mean, the guy has a great wrestling background, or not, watering down his style so it's more effective, but, keeping it as exciting as he can. So, just very impressed with Kung Lee, even though he got beat.
Yeah, you know what? It was crazy in that second round. If you could just sort of like take a picture of, I don't know what the exact time it was. Let's say 2 minutes 30 compared to 2 minutes 50. It was about the space of 30 seconds, and Kung Lee's face looked completely different. His other eye was busted, blood everywhere. It was insane. When you think of Anchorman, when he's like, well, that escalated quickly, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, Jesus Christ. The fact that it, for a guy at Kung Lee's age, who's essentially a part-time fighter, hasn't been in the cage for 2 years, that's just crazy. And anyone who wants to hang shit on Kung Lee really should reconsider their statements, because there's a lot of guys in the UFC that are professional fighters that fight multiple times a year, and people complain that, they're stalling, they gave up, and this and that. Here's a guy that just, like I said, he doesn't need to be in the cage at all, doesn't need to fight. He can just retire, live his life happily with money and his family and stuff like that, and he's just really going for it, not giving it up. Going to the championship rounds. I think that's the first time he's ever gone to the championship rounds, and it took until then for him to get knocked out. Kung Lee, being a short guy, I think he is susceptible to those knees in the tie clinch, kind of like a Verdum, like he likes to do, and like he did to Roy Nelson. But yeah, hats off to Kung Lee, and really happy for the count. At the end of the day, that was a really impressive fight. Whether it was against a part-time fighter or any kind of fighter, it was a great fight.
Yeah, it was good. And before we jump to the next card, it was great to see some respect from Bisping, obviously, to Kung Lee after the fight. It was great to see that side of Bisping. And Kung Lee's fight at the end of that fight, I mean, it looked worse than Rocky at the end of the first Rocky movie. I mean, they were talking about cutting that eye open at one point, and it's just unbelievable. I don't want to say that they let the fight go on too long, but just his face looked, I mean, it looked brutal. I mean, when he was being interviewed, the amount of pain he would have been in just from his face alone, and it was funny seeing Kenny Florian, asking him those questions. And Kung Lee probably, barely can even see what's going on around him, let alone, think to answer. So, yeah, a class act. And very interesting to see what Bisping does. Obviously, he called out our man, Luke Rockhold, who was on the show a few weeks ago. There's a matchup between him and Machida being discussed. But, yeah, definitely an interesting fight between them if that gets put together.
I will say, man, I would love to see a Bisping versus Rockhold, because those are two of the greatest volume strikers in the middleweight division. They both have fantastic cardio. Michael Bisping, very well-rounded, very decent with his wrestling, with his takedown defense and offense. Luke Rockhold, much the same. I'd say probably... I might even give the wrestling to, I was going to say Bisping, but then again, no. Luke Rockhold trains with DC and Cain Velasquez. He's a beast on the ground. Bisping, I don't think, has ever been submitted, and he's also very well-rounded on the ground. I think that would be a fantastic fight, and that's definitely the fight to make, in my opinion. Did you want to talk about the main card, the other fight card now, Dennis, or was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's jump on to the next one. You know, fans got a taste of a great UFC card, and that wasn't it for them, was it, Cass?
No, absolutely. We had, obviously, UFC Fight Night, Henderson versus Dos Anjos, which literally the dust is still settling on that one. We'll talk about the main card because we are kind of running low on time. So you had Chaz Skelly, and I don't know why he doesn't call himself, I think he's the Scrapper. I don't know why he doesn't call himself Chaz the Scallywag Skelly. Great, impressive fight there against Tom Ninimaki. Submission, rear naked choke, first round, 2 minutes and 35 seconds. You know, Chaz Skelly, he didn't really have any success in his first fight in the UFC. You know, a little bit disappointing for him, I'm sure, but he's come back, and he's come back with an absolute vengeance. And, you know, Tom, he's been susceptible to chokes like that, but he's really come into his own and just absolutely decimated him. Really laid-back kind of guy. I like the cut of his jib. Kind of reminds me of one of our other friends, Patrick Cummins. I don't know, just seems like a cool, laid-back guy looking to get better, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him fight more in the featherweight division. What did you think, Dennis?
Absolutely. You know, this is sort of a card of future UFC stars, in my opinion. Like you said, you know, great personality. He definitely represents the Chaz people in the world very well. Seems like he can be a great big star in the UFC in the future, and a very, very slick submission. So yeah, very excited to see what happens with Chaz in the future.
Big Chaz. Next up in the lightweight division, you had James Vick against Valmir Lazaro. Wow, this was an interesting fight. It started off pretty tight for the first, say, 30 seconds, and then it kind of fell apart a little bit. This is a really sloppy, ugly fight. I will say this. It's entertaining. I'm not going to say this is entertaining, but it was pretty sloppy. Good on James Vick for getting the unanimous decision. I think Valmir really sort of looked like he had something for him in the first round. He was obviously making his UFC debut. James Vick coming back. I mean, he hasn't been in the cage for a long time, so I guess you have to factor in cage rust as well. But you know what? He did well. You know, he started putting punches together. Didn't seem to know how to check leg kicks. They both both of their defense primarily consisted of blocking punches with their face. But, you know, I can't take anything away from them because it was an extremely entertaining fight. What did you think, Dennis?
Yeah, you know, absolutely agree with you. It was a bit sloppy, and you know, James Vick gone from fighting for a couple of years there. The one thing I can say is, you know, Vick interests me. I think if he does improve, he could be someone to watch in the UFC in the future. And the other thing is, man, the guy's huge for that division. Which, you know, for the people at home that you know, sort of like the big guys, like to see sort of interesting guys in the division. I think, you know, the UFC can build a nice little thing around him if he does improve his skills. So yeah, absolutely agree with you there, Cass.
Yeah, next fight was a bit of a catch weight at 149 pounds between Max Holloway and Clay Collard. Clay obviously taking this on really short notice, I think 10 days. Again, like Pat Cummins, you always got to respect a guy like that for taking a fight in 10 days. That's crazy, not to mention it's a guy against a guy like Max Holloway, who's no joke. I wouldn't quite say that he's cracked the elite of the featherweight division, but he's up there. I mean, he had a close fight against Conor McGregor. He's no joke. He beat Andre Fili in his last fight, and he's racking up a 3-fight win streak. I mean, Jesus Christ. Clay Collard, every time he threw combinations, it was like something out of Street Fighter when he hit like a 36-hit combo. And Max Holloway, I mean, I was really impressed with him. You know, he weathered the storm. He weathered a guy like Clay Collard who was fighting like he had absolutely nothing to lose. You know, he took it, and, you know, he really showed his experience, and obviously took advantage of Clay Collard's. You know, obviously he wouldn't have had as much conditioning as he would have liked. Maybe his cardio wasn't up to scratch. But this was a sick fight. And like you said, Dennis, you know, this card had a lot of up-and-coming stars, and I think both of those guys are definitely on their way to become big stars. Max Holloway is, you know, running up a little win streak, and Clay Collard, man, I can't wait to see that guy back in the cage. What did you think, Dennis?
You know, there's certain people out there who are meant to be fighters, and there's certain people out there that are sort of strategists, and Collard is one of those guys that's balls to the wall fighter. till he dies. The kid is absolutely amazing. He's only 21 years old. He had something like 60 boxing bouts already going into this one. I believe he already had 13 MMA fights going into this one. Wow. The guy is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, the fact that he could just walk through punches, no bruising, no nothing. I mean, he's the last person you'd want to get into a drunken bar brawl with, basically. The guy reminds me of the evil Terminator from Terminator 2, just keeps coming and coming. He was taunting Holloway at certain parts there. And let's not forget, Holloway is a slick man. I mean, he's 22 years old, but he's got experience to the roof and a really well-rounded, all around, badass. So the fact that Collard could come in on late notice and do as well as he did, I mean, okay, I absolutely agree with you, Cass. Collard had no strategy whatsoever, and anybody with any decent skill, such as Holloway, will take advantage of that and use strategy to pick him apart until they can beat him. But if we can get Collard a decent strategy, if we can get Collard, to mix it up a bit, maybe bring his hands up just, for shits and giggles, I think this kid could be something really, really special in the UFC. And even though he lost this fight, I think a lot of people were just blown away by his performance. I mean, he's the kind of guy you don't want to fight. I mean, he's just an absolute Terminator. And at 21 years old, I mean, with that much confidence, I mean, yeah. He's like the Tank Abbott, basically, the new age Tank Abbott of the division. Give him a few more skills, and he can really be someone special. Fun comment by his corner at the end there in the third round. Take him down, let's cut him open and shit. The kind of mentality that really goes into Collard's mind before a fight, I can tell. But yeah, let's maybe get a Greg Jackson into the corner or something, get some strategy happening, and this guy could really be something. I just love it. I was watching the little promo that they do where they line up in front of the camera and they throw punches, and you look in the guy's eyes and he just doesn't give a crap. I mean, he just seems like the kind of guy that'll pop out of the octagon and he'll fight another 5 times. He's like one of those old school Don Fry guys. They'll fight 5 times in one night and not really give a crap about it. The guy is just really fun to watch, and I'll be interested to see what the UFC machine does with this kid, because they could make a lot of money off him in the future.
Yeah, he is one of the most unassuming looking guys. I mean, he looks that type of guy who would be chilling in a ski lodge in between like snowboarding sessions, and you wouldn't think much. But you're right, he would fight absolutely anyone, anywhere, anytime. And I think that mentality is kind of coming back into the UFC and in fighters in general. A lot of people are getting sick of these guys who are waiting for title shots, etc., etc. Not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with it. I can understand when you've got a brand, there's a lot of things at stake. But when you're fighting and you're just trying to make a name for yourself on undercards and on the early fights and main cards, it's great to have these guys. With Clay Collard, it's interesting that you say, he needs a little bit more strategy. I think one of the reasons why he fought like that is because he knew that, hey, he doesn't necessarily have the cardio. He's not in fighting shape. He needs to put away Max Holloway early, and if he's going to get that done, he needs to be ferocious and really put the pressure on him. I think that if he brought a lot more strategy, maybe bringing in a guy like Greg Jackson, I think fans would kind of recoil at the Clay Collard that we'd see, because he may slow down a lot, and he may win more fights, but he may not be as fan friendly as the fans like him at the moment. Max Holloway, on the other hand, really got to give it up for him. Great fighter, and at such a young age, it's crazy to see him so grounded, so dedicated to his sport. And he did call out Dennis Bermudez out there. They obviously had a controversial fight at one point, not too long ago. I don't see that fight happening, not in a million years. Well, maybe at least not for a few years. Dennis Bermudez is on a 7-fight win streak. There's no way he's going backwards. He brutally destroyed Clay Guida. He's going to get a top 5 guy. I'm quite sure of it. And Max Holloway is not quite there yet. There's no way the UFC would make a rematch, because I don't think that would sell at all.
Yeah, absolutely not. Dennis Bermudez, sort of a diamond in the rough, someone that the UFC can really make money with in the future, and the fans really get him behind him. So very interested to see what happens. But maybe he'll get that Dennis Siver fight that he asked for as well. So that one sort of makes a bit more sense.
Next up in the middleweight division, Thales Leites defeating Francis Carmont in the second round via KO. Dennis, did you see this coming at all?
Jeez Louise. I had no idea this was going to happen. Leites coming in with a bit of a facial hair thing happening there. Looked like the bad boy. It's sort of latest left and came back. Now he's the bad boy. Came in, looking like trouble with a new haircut and some facial hair. Yeah. And I was so impressed, man. I did not see this at all. Did you?
No, not at all. I mean, when he came back into the UFC, let's for a second just remember that he did obviously verse Anderson Silva years ago, back in 2009, UFC 97. Even just looking at the guy, would you even recognize him like at all? I mean, even physique-wise, this guy's gotten so much bigger, so much more muscly. He's worked on his wrestling, and when he did come back to the UFC, back at UFC 163 against Tom Watson, the first thing I noticed is, man, this guy's really been working on his wrestling. He's really fixed his wrestling. Obviously, jiu-jitsu guys, they don't necessarily have the takedowns they need to get the fight on the ground, and sometimes they can be really screwed if they're facing a good wrestler that'll force them to stand up. Man, Taylor's ladies, talk about evolution. Really worked on his wrestling. I didn't realize that his striking was that good. I mean, in his last fight, he did score the TKO against Trevor Smith, obviously in Abu Dhabi, Nogueira versus Nelson. I kind of thought, look, maybe that was a fluke. I don't know. It only happened in the first round in 45 seconds, and Trevor Smith is not exactly a world beater. No offense to him personally, but a guy like Francis Calmon, I mean, has he even been stopped at all in the UFC? I mean, people talking about Taylor Slady's getting the better of him and, getting him on the ground and implementing his ground game. I kind of thought, I don't think so. If you got a guy like Jacare who can't submit him and had him in some really bad, close, rear naked chokes, I didn't think it was going to happen. No freaking way. I believe this is only the second time Francis Calmon's been knocked out in his career. Actually, the first time was a TKO via doctor stoppage. So this is actually the first time Francis Calmon's ever been knocked out. And given that he's versed Jacare, who throws bombs, and CB Dollaway, who's capable of throwing bombs, there is no way in hell I expected Talos Ladies to be the guy to knock him out. Absolutely crazy. I'm not going to jump the gun just yet and say Talos Ladies should be fighting for a title or anything like that. After all, Calmon was coming off back-to-back losses, but that's a nice, sexy little injection to the middleweight division. That is becoming the new lightweight division in terms of a Shark Tank and absolute killers. And man, if I wish I could put like 60 hats on just so I could take them off to Talos Ladies. What do you think of Dennis?
Yeah, absolutely agree with everything that you said. And just to add to that, Talos Ladies, someone who was a victim of his own success, getting that Anderson Silva fight too early in his MMA career, let's be honest, and, not being able to deliver. Why? Because he was a one-dimensional guy, because he went in there and he submitted most of the guys. He didn't need to be a good striker, and after that fight, the UFC soured on him and he had to leave for a few years there and, really work on his game. Now he's back and, just a bit of a dream scenario for me, sort of coming from that storyteller kind of wrestling background. But, imagine Talos Ladies, beats a whole bunch of guys and we see that rematch with Anderson Silva, and this time, he's back and he wants to prove, that he can do a lot better against him. I don't know. Could be something interesting in the future. But yeah, absolutely hats off to Ladies. And, really disappointed for Calmon, but, hopefully he can get back on the winning track in his next fight.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of getting back on the winning track, you had Jordan Meehan against Mike Pyle. What did you think? How did you think this fight was going to go, Dennis? I know this is heartbreaking for a lot of people.
Big Mike Pyle fan. Thought Mike Pyle would bounce back and beat Jordan, and obviously looked away for 1 second, like a lot of people on the Twitterverse. Looked away for 1 second, sort of looking at my tweets and or whatever you and me were doing, Cass, and he missed the whole fight. What did you think was going to happen?
I'm just looking. Obviously, as we're checking this out, we know obviously what happened. We were checking out Wikipedia just so that we know obviously the order of the fights. I'll read out what it says just quickly on Wikipedia. But just on this fight, yeah, Jordan Meehan, man. That, hey, look, I'm really happy for the guy. Mike Pyle, he's obviously sort of getting there in age. The guy's got a lot of experience, a lot of experience. Obviously started his career at 205 pounds. I mean, I knew about this guy way before he even got into the UFC. He was a trainer for a long time. He was a trainer. He started his career against Rampage Jackson in '99. And that was in International Sport Combat Federation, Memphis. So, man, he has a wealth of knowledge. Daniel Cormier was talking about how he choked him unconscious, as in Mike Pyle choked Daniel Cormier unconscious in training. He's kind of like the guy that once he does retire from the sport, he's still going to have a great career. I don't know if he's still training at Extreme Couture, but if I was an upcoming fighter, I'd want the tutelage of a guy like Mike Pyle because he's got so much to show. But man, unfortunately, in this case, Jordan Meehan, he really throws bombs. We've seen that. He even got Matt Brown in trouble when they fought against UFC Fight Night Shogun versus Sonnen. And yeah, that's what happens. Mike Pyle has been known to get caught in the past. It's certainly not his first loss where he's been knocked out. And that's just what happens. Jordan's the younger guy. He's hungrier. He's meaner. And he really wanted this one. So sad day for Mike Pyle fans. He's a really likable guy. I don't know anyone who could possibly not like Mike Pyle. But yeah, Jordan Meehan, just a lot more to prove. And that's basically what happened.
Yeah, exactly right, Cass. Mike Pyle is, and unfortunately, he's a lot like the prom day, but never the prom queen. In training, the guy's amazing, and everybody just has the best things to say about him. And I mean, it's translated to the octagon. He had a very, very nice winning streak there, where he went, I believe it was 4 fights undefeated until he fought Matt Brown. But yeah, it's just tough, and he is a bit older, and unfortunately, like you mentioned, he's susceptible to some of those punches. Now, the young gun, Jordan Meehan, he's actually had a decent run in the UFC. I mean, he beat Dan Miller, but then he lost to Matt Brown. But the Immortal is a beast. Yeah. He went on to win a couple of other fights, including this Mike Pyle fight. So very interested to see what happens with Jordan in the future. But yeah, I think it wrenched a lot of hearts out of a lot of people on Twitter. I mean, the kid's only 24, but I'd like to see Mike Pyle fight again. He did win against TJ Wahlberg previously in February, but yeah, hopefully he can win next time, because I don't like to see Mike Pyle lose. I cry.
Yeah, I know. Mike Pyle loss is always followed by us, crouching in the shower, rocking back and forth. Basically. Not together, of course.
Trying to get the blood off. Why was there blood? We don't know.
Now, in the next fight, the main event, great way to cap off an awesome weekend of fights. Lightweight division, Rafael dos Anjos, RDA against Benson Smooth Henderson. Now, if you're looking at Wikipedia, it's probably a good thing you're listening to the show, because Wikipedia will have you believe that the fight was actually won by Rafael dos Anjos via flying butt sex split decisions breakup. That is not true. We're here to clarify all rumors. That is not true at all. It was not flying butt sex split decisions breaker. It was in fact a TKO. Now, going to this fight, I actually thought Benson Henderson, far more experience. Rafael dos Anjos, of course he's dangerous. He's in the UFC, of course he's dangerous, and he has knockout power. I'd say more of it than Benson Henderson. But I thought, man, Benson Henderson, he's been in there with some scary strikers. He's been in there, obviously, with Nate Diaz. He's been in there with Josh Thompson. He's been in there with Frank Yedgo, who's, I wouldn't say the scariest of strikers, but, he's slick. He's been in there with Gilbert Melendez. He's been in there with Donald Cerrone, Jamie Varner, a lot of guys that can really knock you out. And I kind of thought, Rafael, he's got a nice little streak going, but tonight that ends much like Rustam Khabilov. And I thought Benson Henderson was going to pick him apart on the feet. A lot of those leg kicks, those kicks to the calf. I thought, he's going to mix in some takedowns. I don't think Rafael dos Anjos' ground game would threaten him with too much in terms of submissions. And I thought, he's going to be cruising to a decision victory, if not a late stoppage, possibly in the 4th or the 5th. And I thought, Rafael dos Anjos, he's had fights where he's just been swinging for the fences, swinging wildly, and I thought it's going to be a classic case of that, where, by round 3 or 4, Rafael's going to be swinging wildly, no setups, trying to knock out Benson Henderson. Wow, were we surprised? Dennis, what did you think?
Well, I leading into this fight, thought crossed my mind, what if Benson Henderson loses? That would be horrible, and then it happened, so... Yeah, it was just absolutely unbelievable. I don't think many people expected it. I don't think Benson Henderson really expected it. And I think after it happened, Benson Henderson still wasn't expecting what was going to happen next, which was the referee saying that he lost. I don't think anybody in the arena really expected it, maybe apart from Dos Anjos's, parents and girlfriend or whoever else is in his family. And, it happened. And for a second there, I think, there was a bit of silence. Everybody dropped their jaws, and even, Benson Henderson's toothpick decided to, go home and not participate in this post-fight celebration. It was just, it was very impressive. Rafael is one of those guys that, like you said, has a very impressive record, but doesn't really get the chops that he deserves. I think now people are going to give him those chops and anything else that he wants. Not the most inspiring post-fight speech. Call someone out, young man. But it was definitely, it was a jaw-dropping situation. What did you think, Cass?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we've always thought, lightweight division, always an absolute shark tank, and you really don't know what's going to happen. You can basically match anyone with anyone in the top 20, and, some fights you could lean towards a guy more than others, but it's still always going to be a toss-up. Just look at Bobby Green against Josh Thompson. I think on paper Josh Thompson was the favorite, and Bobby Green, took over. I think just like tonight, Benson Henderson was the favorite, and RDA really put a stamp on it in a way that Chris Lieben would be very proud. In terms of Rafael Dos Anjos' record, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the most impressive. His biggest wins have been against guys like, not Anthony Njokuani, I guess Mark Bocek, and Donald Cerrone up until this point was probably his biggest win. Now, RDA has added, striking and dangerous knockout power to his arsenal. I just really didn't think it was going to be a factor against Benson Henderson. Like we said, Benson Henderson, he doesn't get hit that much in the octagon. He's quite elusive, good defense, and when he needs to, if he's in any kind of trouble, he always takes the fight to the ground. Now, having said that, I agree 100% with the stoppage. I think John McCarthy did a fantastic job. If you look at the replay, Benson Henderson looked like he was trying to crawl out of the octagon. Now, I have not read the rules of MMA, but I would assume that is not in there on the list of ways to intelligently defend yourself. If you look at the replay, there was a brief second where Rafael Dos Anjos kind of stopped. The ref came in, and that's when Benson Henderson's lights turned back on. He wasn't out cold by any means, but he looked very, very out of it, for lack of a better term. And I think had the ref not stepped in, man, RDA would have just kept pounding on him. And I think the crowd reacted, I guess, fairly, in the sense that they all thought because Benson was such a huge favorite, they didn't expect it to happen. But just because you're surprised, just because you're emotional, does not mean that it's a bad stoppage. There's been quite a few cases recently of crowds booing, and I just really disagreed with them booing for any kind of reason. I think you got to give Dos Anjos his dues. I mean, this is absolutely a fair stoppage. Benson got caught. I don't see it happening too many more times in his career, to be perfectly honest. I think he's going to learn from it, but this is absolutely fair. You got to give Dos Anjos all credit. It was a fair stoppage. Good on Dos Anjos. John McCarthy, hats off, did a great job. Yeah, it is what it is. JC was obviously asleep for this one in Benson's fight. He'll come back stronger. I think, honestly, the UFC are kind of relieved, because even though Benson Henderson's looked great recently, I don't think he did much for the UFC in terms of being a champion. I think, Anthony, and it's funny saying that, because Anthony Pettis has been on the shelf for a long, long time. But, Anthony Pettis has crazy, exciting fights and this and that. I don't think the crowd got behind Benson Henderson quite as much. I mean, you didn't see him possibly in the draw to be on the front cover of a Wheaties box. I think the UFC really can't wait till Anthony Pettis comes back, and they're gonna plug the shit out of him in terms of promotion and this and that. I think there's a lot of ways where they can go, get all the Latino market on Anthony Pettis. So I think the UFC are kind of, thankful that Benson Henderson, lost, because I don't think that they're biased, but I couldn't really see anyone buying another pay-per-view with Benson Henderson against Anthony Pettis, given that he's lost to him twice already. What did you think, Dennis?
Rafael started fighting in the UFC in 2008, and to all our listeners, I ask you this question: what were you doing in 2008? Because 2008 is a long, long time ago. And he has been in the UFC for a really long time. And I'm pretty sure that not a lot of people have taken notice of him until the last few years. I mean, I know a lot of the hardcore fans know him. I know that a lot of people who really appreciate the UFC know him. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of casual fans, this could be the first time they're really taking notice of him. And he was in the UFC since 2008. So that's just a crazy statistic for me. But yeah, in terms of Benson Henderson, that's what happens. You take on a lot of tough guys to climb back up the ladder, and that's the risk that it takes. I'm interested to see what happens with Benson after this, because it has to be such a major blow to him. Because I know that he wanted that title shot again, but now there is no chance that he's going to get back to that title anytime too soon. Of course, I don't want to talk too soon, because who knows what's going to happen in the UFC. Crazy things have happened.
Yeah.
But it was a tough night for Benson. It shows you that anything can happen in the octagon, and really interested to see what they do with Rafael next. Hopefully, they do give him an opponent up there in stature to show us what he can do there. And wow. That's all I can say. Wow. And too bad for Henderson. And UFC, what are you going to do with him? And the Wheaties box? Yeah. Except I can't see Rafael in a Wheaties box either. Unless it's a sneaky Wheaties box from is he from Brazil, Rafael?
Yeah, he is. Yes.
Yeah, Brazilian Wheaties box, maybe.
You know what he'd be great on? Count Chocula. I think he's definitely got the face for Count Chocula. I've always thought that, I'm not trying to be mean, I just thought, hey, RDA, fantastic fighter, and I give him all the respect in the world, but I would say just in terms of, I don't know whether it's his haircut or what, he kind of reminds me of Frankenstein, which is not such a bad thing because Frankenstein was a monster basically made from other parts of monsters.
You're not helping this guy.
And in MMA, it's all about taking things from others and other martial arts and making them your own. So there we go. Come full circle. It was a compliment disguised as hilarity, but I'm just saying, like, you know.
Yeah, hopefully he just doesn't. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this show so that we don't brutally bruise his ego. But no, absolutely, maybe a kind of Chocula, or you know, some other Head and Shoulders. You know, he's still got his hair, so there's definitely some options for him. The latest 1980s pop songs that are coming out over there. Maybe he could be on the cover. No, I'm kidding. I kid. But yeah, Rafael, great job. And we'll try and get him on the show to discuss who he wants next. But yeah, Cass, it was an exciting time period of fights there. I know a lot of people in America, it was sort of in a day period for them. So they were talking about how tired they were. But for us in Australia, some people started watching the fights. You know, well, the fights were on at 11 last night, and then they were on this morning. So you know, it's quite good for us Aussies. Finally, the timing actually works out for the Aussies a little bit better than the Americans. How about that?
Well, for anyone in America complaining about, you know, having to get, I think in America they had it tough. They had it like 6 in the morning. But to put them in perspective, normally pay-per-views for us, they start anywhere from 11, usually either 12 p.m. Or 2 p.m. in the afternoon, which is pretty early given it's a Sunday. If you go out on a Saturday night and you're smashed, and in Australia, let's be honest, everyone's smashed on a Sunday morning, it's a tough one to wake up for. Then you got, you know, the UFC coming down live. They're doing events 8:30, 9 o'clock, 9:30 in the morning. In the morning. Oh man, that is insane. I can't get up that early unless I have to go to work. So to go to UFC, it's tough and it's brutal. It's on a weekend. You go out the night before. You probably don't sleep. I'll just a poll right here. 99.9% of Australians are wasted, shit-faced at UFC events from
at 9 in the morning.
At 9 in the morning. Oh, still from the previous night. So.
Oh yeah, and you know, you and me, we've you know, we're UFC faithfuls. We go down to most events, and you know, there's been a few events there where you know, we've had friends fall asleep in their chairs, and it's not because the cards aren't exciting. It's because, you know, they're exhausted from the night before, and we've actually had friends opt for the sleep in rather than to go to the show. And I'm talking about some decent seats here. It's absolutely pitfall. We won't name their names. We don't want you guys finding them and stoning them to death. But yeah, I've seen it happen, man. And yeah, it's definitely tough for us Aussies sometimes.
In this case, obviously you had Bisping versus Lee at a cruisy 11 o'clock at night last night, chilling out in our mansions with rich mahogany furniture. I'm just kidding, we live in flats, not really. Chilling out 11 o'clock at night. No, in all honesty, we were in the theater room relaxing in our big-ass Samsung LED TVs, chilling out. After the fights, you go, you sleep, catch 40 winks, and you wake up, boom, UFC's on TV. Prelims 10 a.m. on Fuel TV, what an awesome channel. And now 12 p.m. you got the main card. So for once it worked out for us Aussies. And you know what? What a great time to make mention. The UFC, there's talks, I don't want to confirm anything, but it looks like the UFC is going to be coming back to Australia, to Sydney, because stupid Melbourne, who we live in and we love, obviously won't allow the cage, and more to come on that, you know, in a few episodes. Looks like they're coming back to Sydney on November the 8th. So put on your excited faces, all you Aussies. Looks like we're going to get another dose, another hit of the sport that we so valiantly crave. And yeah, mark the date in your calendar. Not 100% confirmed, but usually when these things break, the date remains the same. So no updates, no mentions of who's coming down. It'd be interesting to see. I don't think Mark Hunks is obviously going to be fighting Roy Nelson in Japan. Possibly a Hector Lombard, possibly a Dylan Andrews, possibly I'd be surprised if they didn't put Jake Matthews on the card. Possibly Badger O'Reilly getting in the shot. He's obviously in Melbourne, so.
Badger, yeah, you know, and, you know, I don't want to be ungrateful here, but if anybody from the UFC is listening, if we could get a couple of exciting matchups, that would be great. You know, you and me, Cass, we were at UFC 110 that 1 year, the first crazy, UFC, you know, and by the way, the crowd going silent, you guys should have seen how silent the crowd got when Cain Velasquez smashed Nogueira in that first minute of the first round. And, you know, we had a Pride faithful sitting with us next to us called Adrian, who was a huge fan. And, you know, and I think I saw a teardrop at that moment as soon as Nogueira got knocked out. None of us were the same again. And I believe Nogueira went to the zoo and got drunk the next day. But, but yeah, absolutely, you know what that feels like. And yeah, very excited to see what the UFC brings down here to Australia. And you know what, Cass? The UFC needs to be careful because they're affecting people's relationships with these double cards. I mean, I know a lot of these MMA fans have girlfriends and wives, and we all know what it's like when your girlfriend goes, "Oh, Dennis, what are we doing this weekend?" And then somehow you subtly work in the fact that you'll be watching 8 hours of fights over the weekend and you haven't seen them in 3 or 4 days. I think there's a few divorces being caused by these multiple cards, and I think with the girlfriends, they'll have to get into MMA because there's a card on every weekend, and my girlfriend yeah, she's not too happy about it, but, you know, it's a part of the job. It's a part of the job. That's what I tell her. But, you know, for a lot of these fans, you know, start working on your excuses, guys, because the cards are stacked up over the next few weeks.
Don't worry about jiu-jitsu training. That's not going to save you from a girlfriend. Don't worry about kickboxing or, you know, Rafael Cordero or Rain MMA or anything like that. Man, you need to work on you need to drill and practice excuses. That's what you need to do. Because when it comes to the weekend, you know, you can, it doesn't matter about that dude who wants to beat the shit out of you at work. You know, the girlfriend will always win. The girlfriend will always take your time. And it so happens that we're approaching a period where there's going to be a fight card every single weekend. This is just the UFC. Every single weekend until about October 4th, I believe. That is when we will finally get a little bit of a break and the girlfriends will be happy if they're still around.
Yeah, that's right. A picture of Buzz and Woody, divorces everywhere is the meme that it says. And yeah, absolutely, guys, work on those excuses. And hopefully there's not, you know, all I'm saying is Dana White needs to think about these marriages. And as Chris Lieben said in an interview before on this episode, you know, happy wife, happy life. Or I believe I said that, but he agreed with me and he said bro. So that's official.
You know what? On that note, I think that's time for us to call it quits. And a big thank you to all our guests on this episode. Obviously, Chris Lieben, what a champion, what a great guy to chat to. King Mo, really appreciate how open and cordial he was with us. You know, really gave his opinions on a lot of things. And of course, Anderson Silva's manager, Ed Suarez, great to chat to him. Grateful for him giving us obviously updates on Anderson Silva. Can't wait for all their future fights. Obviously sans Chris Lieben because he's retired and training the up and comers in MMA now. That's another week from us, guys. Next week we've got a lot of big fighters coming on the show. It's going to be another sick one. If you've enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel or like the video, and of course we can always be reached at Twitter at SubmissionAUS. That's SubmissionOz. Dennis, anything else you want to say to the lovely MMA people that have been listening?
Guys, come up with some good excuses and we'll catch you next week.